Hello, everybody. Hope you're doing great. Hi, Charlene. Hi, Drangimatrin. And hi, Quasbortrain. And hi, Dr. Tom and Kyle. How are you doing?
Here we go. Didn't have my audio.
Oh, okay.
Now I'm set. I'm all fine.
See, this is it. This is what happens. You almost lost power. We have audio. Like, what is happening? And I had no tech issues. Today is the day of weirdness. That we are cursed, I think. Something strange is happening.
It's a strange day, to be sure.
It is a strange day. A good day, though, I hope.
I hope so as well. Anyways, how are you both doing? All good?
Just fine. Living the dream.
That's good.
Yeah, it has been a week. I've been looking forward to this a lot. It has been a week.
Yes.
Yeah, it's been a week. That's yeah. It's been on. Oh man, the trials and travails of running an indie RPG publisher is not lost on me at this moment.
Okay.
A lot of our print order for the last Kickstarter came back damaged or incorrect. And the publisher, the printing office, is not replacing it for us. So I am left to figure out how to address that. That's what I've been dealing with the last 2 weeks. So
ouch.
I don't have anything like that, but why did I get called in for jury duty the day before the 4th of July?
Oh, seriously?
that is odd.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I'm out. I'm done with it. But I was like, I have to drive through downtown LA at 6 o'clock in the morning, and then go and sit in the jury room and just kind of go, okay, whatever.
Have we talked about this? I used to live in LA.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. So I know what that's.
Ground.
I was gonna say. Well, no, I lived in LA. I was literally right across from the Grove. So I lived in Park La Brea. So I was down the street from the SAG-AFTRA building. It was awful. Driving through that place sucked.
Yeah. No, I live down in Lakewood, so
okay,
it's a long drive, but
yeah, Lakewood is I was gonna say Lakewood's a different beast. Not a different. That's not. At some point, they're all the same beast. At some point, they're all the same amount of traffic.
Well, there's no gaps between them, so
right. It's just one contiguous.
There's 20 million people living next to each other.
Yep. With no reasonable public transport.
No.
At least with New York, public transport's relatively decent.
Yeah.
With Los Angeles, I saw one bus that looked like it had been through the Tet Offensive, I think, the entire time that I lived there.
Okay.
All right, we're gonna get off topic, but we'll have to commiserate about that because that's so fun.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right.
When have we ever been on topic?
That's true. At some point, I feel like most people know what they're getting into, and the three of us are on the same podcast together.
Right. Absolutely right.
Okay, so Dungeon Matron is asking how many Maltas do we calculate that fit into Los Angeles? I'll be honest, I forgot. I think we got to a figure, but since I calculated it in Danny DeVito's, I kind of lost the number.
At least 3.
At least 3.
Yeah.
At least 3.
Possibly more than that.
That's fine. That's what I say. Anytime someone asks me a math question, I'm just at least 3.
But yeah. So, would either of you like to explain what we're going to be talking about today?
Well, I think it's kind of weird because when we started talking about this, we were like, who are the number 2 people that you just never hear of? Or I was saying to Karl yesterday, let's make it clear that by number 2, we don't mean that these people are shit, right?
Yeah, so, we don't want to shitstream.
But in many cases, they've been treated that way, relative to what they accomplished. So I guess the idea is there are giants in history, and then there are the people who are half a step behind the giants, and you don't see them. They're obscured by the giants. And yet, if the giants were not there, we'd probably be looking at these people as giants.
Mm-hmm.
Or to that point, too, people who have accomplished things that just aren't sexy. In history, a lot of times, the sexy stuff, the conquering, gets, talked about, like the big flashy inventions, but but the little things, the things that like maybe we would take for granted. So even if like the giant isn't there, maybe we would love him. But like some people on my list have incredible achievements that nobody thinks about. Even though there's nobody else in that field or in that time period that's competing with them on the same level.
Yeah, and PR is very important.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, I see that.
If you don't have a good press agent, nobody's going to know you.
It turns out the majority of everything is marketing.
It is.
Which is horrifying to think about.
So I have 3 of them.
Okay. Oh, by the way, let's just recap one thing. As we discussed last time, we're not going to put Philip of Macedon up again, although he fits perfectly in this category. And same with Marcus Agrippa. But surprisingly, there are a lot of people who fit in this group, surprisingly.
I also house ruled it because I'm not mentioning anybody from the Second Punic War. So no Hannibal for me, no Scipio Africanus, no, because I talked at length about them and love them, but that's I gotta. Malta can fit 4
times. Okay.
4 times. Imagining a hospitaller-run Los Angeles government is actually is one of the most insane things I think I've thought about today.
Well, the architecture would change.
The architecture
absolutely.
would vastly change.
Yeah, I mean, look, hospital architecture is like, okay, how can we make this the pimpiest we can possibly can?
Yeah. I mean, of all of the Crusader Knight orders, they definitely have the most sauce. I actually almost put them on the list because people always talk about the Templars, and I'm like, guys, come on, like they're not even the coolest order.
Yeah, I mean, they actually managed to survive. Let's just start with that.
No, it's a big plus. Okay, but since we mentioned them, let's throw out a quick spoiler out there. For our next stream, I am bringing in an old friend of mine, Franco. Master in Hospitalier Studies, who will and we'll just be bouncing off about the maritime activities of the Hospitallers. So it's knights on a boat.
As somebody who got yelled at in the comments section of his video on the Crusades, because I dared suggest that like maritime economics are one of the biggest factors of the Crusades. That made me so happy. Like, I was like, I'm just thank you.
You're welcome.
Just know that there's a very angry middle-aged white man with a profile picture that says "I am an alpha" that is not thrilled about that topic being discussed.
That's okay. That's perfectly.
Who wants to go first?
Perfectly all right.
See there you go. I have a comb. I don't know why I have a comb nearby. But there's not a whole lot to do with it. But who wants to go first? Oh, you draw. See, that's way cool. Oh wait, no, I have a bottle opener. Which is, I don't know if you can see this on camera.
Okay, I see it.
But my brother went to Australia, and so this bottle opener is a taxidermied kangaroo testicle for a handle, and so that is my. There you go, folks.
I believe that's one of Australia's prime exports. Yeah.
I know what that makes sense. On that note, who wants to go first?
Well, I'll go first.
Go ahead.
I'll break it, guys. So I guess one of the things as I was thinking about these folks is I wanted to get somebody. Yeah, I'm going to give an example of somebody that I didn't choose, and that's George C. Marshall.
I have no idea what it is.
Well, that's one of the things was if it's really a number 2, if it's a really good example, you probably haven't heard of them, because they would have been totally obscured by number 1. But my problem was I couldn't figure out who number 1 was in front of George C. Marshall. I guess it would be like FDR or somebody like that. So I threw him out, basically. Because I was like, well, I can't be clear on number 1, because number 1, it feels like has to be almost transcendent. So anyway, that was sort of my take. So my first one is a man named Francis Walsingham, and you may have heard of him, but probably not. So
is it Sir Francis Walsingham?
Yeah, Sir Francis Walsingham.
Name rings a bell, but I have absolutely no idea which context I heard about him.
Okay, so we're talking about the 16th century, And he is probably, I'll make my pitch for him first, I guess. He is the first modern spy master.
Ooh.
It is he that traps Mary Queen of Scots into the position that gets her killed. So a little bit of background. So he was what was at the time called the principal secretary to Elizabeth I. And the key to being the principal secretary is you have no job description. It's you just do whatever needs to get done. And so typically the people who held that position were a little bit of everything. And he, for example, not only was not officially, because none of this is official, he was not only a spy master, he also sort of ran the postal service, which you could see how they would interact.
Yeah,
actually. No, that actually does make sense.
Yes, it does. Absolutely.
Yeah, like that actually tracks.
Yes.
Yeah, Cromwell had a spy master named John Thurlow, who was the principal secretary and the official head of the post office. And basically, he just merged the two budgets together because he was like, there's really no difference as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. But the number one, I think it's kind of important sometimes to say who the number one is. Why don't you know about Sir Francis Walsingham? And the answer is that he worked for a man named William Cecil. And William Cecil is sometimes known as Lord Burleigh. And Cecil was the guy who was Elizabeth's primary advisor for about 45 years. And it was he that was running the country for her from the moment that she came to the throne until he died in the later 1590s. And his position was so strong that, and again, this is going to be something I suspect we'll come back to, is that even if the number one guy dies, he still obscures the number two guy, because he trained his son, Robert Cecil, who became the Earl of Salisbury, to take his place. So the Salisburys, or the Cecils, I should say, ended up being the primary advisors to whoever was the king or queen of England for more than half a century. And they ran everything. So there was no room for Walsingham. But the things that he did, once you actually look at it, are really pretty interesting. So he was, unlike Cecil, who sort of kept changing his position during the kings and queens before Elizabeth. He just said whatever would get him through the day, basically. Walsingham was a Puritan, and he actually had to leave England. And when he came back, even though Elizabeth didn't particularly like Puritans, she recognized that he was the dude. So he was the ambassador, the English ambassador in Paris during the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre. And it was he that basically controlled the flow of information to and from Elizabeth on that. He did such a good job that they brought him back. They made him principal secretary. As I said, he became a spy master extraordinaire. He had people in the court of the Spanish king, the Pope, the French king, the Scottish queen. They're all reporting to him. In addition, he actually penetrated the Jesuit college in France that trained English Catholics to come back to England. So it wasn't just intelligence, it was also counterintelligence.
All right.
So if an English Jesuit showed up in England, it was he who caught him and usually tortured him and then had him executed. But not always, because he recognized you don't need to create more martyrs. So especially he did this for about 25 years. And it was his hand that set up this incredibly intricate plot to trap Mary, Queen of Scots. And Mary, Queen of Scots had been run out of Scotland, basically, had run to England, and had been captured by the English. And this put Elizabeth in a really difficult position because technically this was another monarch, right? Mary was not an English subject, but she couldn't let her run around because Catholics thought that Mary should be Queen of England. So she kept her imprisoned for many years. And if it had just been left to her, she probably would have had her executed. But, that's a terrible precedent if you start executing people who have, anointed monarchs, right? When you're one yourself. So it was sort of left to, thank you, Kat. It was sort of left to Walsingham to set up a situation that would force Elizabeth to sign Mary's death warrant. And it took him years to do it. And it involved double and triple agents. He actually let another plot to execute Elizabeth go sort of undealt with because he thought we can always stop them, but it's very important to get rid of Mary. And so the result was that at the end of the day, he presented the Queen with all of these letters back and forth where Mary clearly was contemplating Elizabeth's execution. And Elizabeth at least got her to sign the death warrant. And then Cecil and Walsingham sort of worked together to make sure that death warrant actually made it to where Mary was going to be executed, because Elizabeth had said, I'm signing it, but don't send it. So essentially they managed to get it to where Mary was being held and Mary was executed. And well, Elizabeth got really pissed and exiled both of them from court, but they were both so important that she had to call them back within like a month.
Okay.
Which was exactly what the plan was. I knew
exactly.
that. I knew that story. I knew that the conspirators of Elizabeth, or not Elizabeth, but of Mary's execution were like, it doesn't matter. Like it just doesn't matter.
Yeah. Once it's done, it's done.
Right.
And you're lobbying
you need us to run the country. So
yes,
get bent.
And so
like, basically.
Yeah. And the thing is that Cecil was in perpetual bad health. And the Queen actually said, if something happens to Cecil, you're going to be the next state secretary. Mm-hmm. Ironically, of course, Walsingham was also in bad health and died before Cecil.
Oh.
So one of the reasons that you don't know about him is that he didn't outlive number one.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then in a sense, number one, by training his son to take over and be the primary guy for James I, it just hid Walsingham from sight even more. Yeah. But both of these guys were masters of detail, the kind of guys who would sit up all night writing long memoranda that collated information gathered from all over Europe, down to how many ships does the King of Spain have at his disposal, how many barrels of wine are being, tracked for each ship. I mean, just an incredible amount of detail. But then to be able to take that detail and put it into a format that, they would have been kings of PowerPoint, basically. And it worked. I mean, they kept Elizabeth on the throne. So it's kind of a weird guy. I just look at him and I sort of think, wow, he could do everything that Cecil did. He just never got a chance. But I mean, he didn't fail at anything. In spite of the fact that Elizabeth didn't particularly like him. She did like Cecil, but she didn't like Walsingham because he was too puritanical for her. But at the same time, she couldn't do without him. So that's my first number two. My number one, number two. The only other thing that's really strange about it, not strange, but sort of important about him is that, by the way, he also managed to trapped the next English ambassador to France and discovered that he was a traitor and ran him as a double agent for about 5 years. But he was also the father-in-law of Sir Philip Sidney, the Elizabethan poet.
Huh.
Okay.
So anyway, that's all.
Good for him. That's kind of...
Yeah, I mean, just there are books on him, but not very many. Whereas there are scads of things on Elizabethan administration that talk about Cecil.
Right.
You know, who was a true number one. I'm not saying he wasn't.
Yeah.
But if Cecil wasn't there, Walsingham could have stepped in and they wouldn't have lost a beat.
Which is crazy to think about.
Yeah.
Like, just in general, that's crazy to think about. Well, and also too, maybe that's like a feather in his cap. He's like, yeah, I'm that good at espionage. No one knows me. He's dead and he's still doing his espionage job.
Pretty much.
He's still operating from behind the scenes. Like, that's kind of impressive as far as, like, you know, being unknown goes. If that's your strength, man, that's, I don't know.
Oh yeah, and there are
impressive.
You know, the people who knew who he was hated him. I mean, so, you know, Catholic leaders hated him more than they hated Cecil.
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
Well, because if you know who is actually, like, you know, something about too, like, just religious figures who wind up with secular authority are so scary. Are so scary.
Yeah, no kidding.
Just in general, they're so scary.
Yeah.
That should be one of our topics at one of these shows. We should just do, like, people with really scary religious positions that get secular authority, because that never
Never works
goes
out.
I mean, it depends. There are a couple people that clearly it worked out for Elizabeth, because that guy.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, but part of it was, in a sense, I mean, you know, the phrase "speaking truth to power," that was Walsingham. He would tell her, "No, that's a bad idea, Your Majesty." Cecil would argue her out of it, but he would just go, "No, that's not a good idea."
It's stupid as heck. It's stupid. What are we doing?
Yeah, it's probably one of the reasons why she didn't like him that much.
Yeah. And also too, like, Elizabeth probably was not used to that. 'Cause I'm just thinking, like, of all of the, like, when we think of, like, really competent monarchs, like, she is up there. You know what I mean? There's not a lot of scenarios where somebody could look at Elizabeth and be like, that's a stupid decision, and have them actually be right. Because usually Elizabeth knew what the heck she was doing, which is a high bar for a lot of monarchs. At least I think, anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Compared to some of her contemporaries, you know, the stakes were really high at that point, and she seems to be one of the few monarchs who was actually playing as if they were high.
Yeah. Yep. The stakes were high, and she never flinched, which is yeah, that's a lot. Oh man, that's so we could talk about Elizabethan politics and spy stuff all day too. That's so fun.
All right, that's mine. So who's next?
Okay, Kyle, I want to go to yours.
I guess I get my middle one. So, gentlemen, let me walk you through a thought experiment. Have you ever had a really ridiculous idea, and then you were like, no, I can't do that, but it's like a brain tick and you can't get it out? So my first pick is kind of a joke, kind of not, but we never really talk about entertainment here when it comes to history, and we never really talk about anything in recent history. And so I want to talk about arguably the worst case of second place syndrome in popular music. My pick is the entirety of the band Genesis.
Okay.
I'm not even kidding, because I thought about this the other day, and it's horrific. So like, just let me walk you all through this, audience. You can, you know, close your eyes, grab a drink, whatever. You are one of the most wildly successful American pop bands, or not American pop bands, one of the most wildly successful pop bands in history, right? You are crushing the charts, massive radio play, critical and commercial success. You are pushing the boundaries of what you think is possible with music. And your lead singer, over the course of this time, starts to get a little big for their britches, right? And then you're like, they decide, hey, I'm going to leave this band. And you're like, we're already at the top, man. Why would you leave? And he's like, no, I know I'm better than you guys. And that lead singer is Peter Gabriel, who goes on to have one of the most wildly critically and commercially successful careers for an individual pop singer. ever. It dwarfs the success of Genesis because Peter Gabriel is still doing
Yep.
numbers and Genesis isn't. And so imagine being Genesis and having that happen. And then you're like, it's cool. We can rebuild. We still have clout. We still have strength. We still have motion within the popular landscape. So they get a new lead singer and they go even higher. They keep pushing. They keep making more critically successful. Their albums start selling way more. They start getting talked about in the Grammy conversation. And like 2-3 years into that, their lead singer just goes, I think I could be more successful than you guys. And that person's Phil Collins. Like, I thought about that. I was like, I can't. If I was in Genesis, I would be sick. Imagine, like, that's horrendous. He makes the Tarzan soundtrack. What are we even doing here? Like,
well, I don't want to hijack your discussion,
please.
but I went to school in England. I went to school at the school that Genesis came out of.
Okay.
And I arrived there in 1977. And at that point, Peter Gabriel had left, right? It was just after the first, and then there were three, basically album came out. So Gabriel had left, Steve Hackett had left because Steve Hackett was like, oh, we've lost Peter Gabriel, so I might as well leave because this thing is going to tank. There were literally like fist fights in the dorms over whether, new Genesis was better or worse than old Genesis. But yeah, this is something that you see over and over again, not just in music, but in other things, it's like, no, we were number one. Now we're number two. Now we're gonna push back to number one, and then something else happens and knocks you back down, and then you try it again, and by the time it's over, it's just kind of like, wow, we spent a lot of time trying, didn't we?
I just and here's the thing though, it felt like like there are examples of that, but I don't know if, at least in like music, that was the thing, because then I started thinking about like other musical acts, at least in the modern era, that had this happen, right? And I don't think any band had it happen
twice
that often, and where the person leaving had that much success. Like Destiny's Child was a great example, because Beyonce leaves Destiny's Child, and Beyonce's like one of the biggest pop artists on the planet. You could probably argue she is, but like, they never made a comeback.
They never come back. Yeah.
Right. They never come back. Right. Destiny's Child is officially done. And let's be real, even like if you look at early Destiny's Child, you can tell like who's going to be the big force.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. At least like when I remember like reading about the stuff about Peter Gabriel leaving, everyone's like, is this a good idea? And Peter Gabriel's like, no, I got this. And everyone's like, okay, dude, I guess. And he got that. Right. And same with Phil Collins too. Or like, so they give like Destiny's Child was a great example of that. Like, NSYNC with Justin Timberlake. Like, again, it was a big one. I know this is like not public history or like not ancient history. I'm sure our audience is like, what are we even talking about here? But like this, I think it's an interesting point, because when we're talking about, like you said, when we're talking about like living in the shadows of giants, sometimes this is going to sound like the worst historical justification for talking about Genesis and Phil Collins and the Tarzan soundtrack, but just let work with me here, people. Sting is a great example as well, from the Police, but the Police never make a huge comeback though, right? Not that I can remember.
No, didn't.
Yeah.
Oh, what about? Here's one that cuts the other way. What about Van Halen?
That's true. Where somebody goes.
So David Lee Roth thinks that he's God's gift to humanity and leaves because he's going to be bigger. And they go out and get Sammy Hagar, and they just become bigger.
Yeah. And I think that's true too. Metallica has that happen too, where a couple members, I think, leave and drift in and out of the band.
But it's always the bassist.
What is that? It is always the bassist. Why is that?
Like, don't be Metallica's bassist. That's all.
Yeah. But no, like in general though, I think this speaks to a larger point. Sometimes there is an it factor that we just don't know how to predict when it comes to knowing who is and who isn't going to be huge. In terms of Ozzy's another great example for Black Sabbath. Actually, oh my God, Black Sabbath.
Black
Black
Sabbath
Sabbath that happens to them twice
as
because
well.
it's
Yeah.
Ozzy and Ronnie James Dio.
Yeah.
Oh, Dungeon Matron, you rock. Yes, I didn't even think about Black Sabbath. Yes, and Dio's huge. Although I would argue that Black Sabbath is bigger than Dio, I think, for a little bit. But that's the
Yes.
closest one I can think of. I mean, again, I am always partial to Ronnie James Dio. I'll pick Dio over Ozzy any day of the week. I don't know if that's controversial or
No,
not.
for one thing, he has a voice.
He does. He also invented this, which is cool.
Yes, yeah.
Rock and roll music. But no, like I think just to extrapolate this to a greater historical point, I think one of the things that happens is you just don't know who has that it factor. And this comes up a lot where it's like sometimes the person you think is the front runner for a situation or for a political movement, for a military movement, whatever, turns out to be the person that like is not going to do well. And sometimes the person you think has absolutely zero emotion at all winds up being the best. This happens all the time in history. Everyone thought Oliver Cromwell was a numpty until Oliver Cromwell basically ran England, right? Nobody in the early Communist Party thought Stalin was worth anything. And then Stalin becomes the major frontrunner. Sometimes, like, again, this is not a great historical sounding argument. Sometimes plot armor just is real. Like, sometimes the story just aligns and that's it. Like there isn't like we can sit here and debate, greater geopolitical factors or whatever, but sometimes it just feels like there's plot armor in history and you have to somehow, if you're one of those people caught in that current, you have to figure out how to deal with it.
Okay, here's an example. Because back on whatever the topic was where I was all over Philip of Macedon. The fact that a lot of what Alexander did was based on what his father had done, right? But so now let's talk about the Diadochi, the Alexander's successors.
It's don't you dare! Don't you dare! There's one of them on my list for today. Don't you dare!
Okay, I'll stop because I'm afraid it is the same person.
Don't you dare!
I
had one of those prepared for you today specifically because of our conversation. And I know you. I know you're gonna pick the one I want to talk about.
All right, I won't do it. I'll wait.
Can you all right, do me a favor right now though? Write down which Diadochi you think I'm going to talk about because I want to see if I'm right. I want to like who are you going to mention? We're going to call our shots right now.
Okay, go for it.
All right, and just so there's no cheating, I'm going to send Karl a message on chat. So that actually okay, apparently it's not letting me do. All right, I'm going to send Karl a message on Discord right now. So that way we all know that if I cut Tom off, it's this way it didn't get foiled. I was like, I guarantee it. I guarantee it's gonna be the same one. All right. Oh man, I mean, second you said Diadochi, I'm like, no. I knew it was coming. All right. I think I spelled his name wrong, but there you go, Karl. I just said that. All right, we're calling our shots right now. Yep. But yeah, I think that's part of the reason why I picked them. I think, sometimes you just get caught up in the current. Sometimes you don't know who has the it factor. And sometimes you can have everything going for you and you can lose one piece and it demotes you from like first place to the historical version of an also ran. And that's Genesis, I think, is indicative of that.
And it takes, there's like a certain, I don't know what you want to call it. We'll just call it magic for want of a better word. There's a certain magic that leads towards putting together any kind of organization that just takes off, right?
Yeah.
And asking lightning to strike twice is very, very difficult. Actually, that's ridiculous. Actually, lightning does strike twice in the same place quite frequently, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do. Here's my thing is always too. This is actually a really good point as well. And again, I know it seems ridiculous to pick Genesis, but like there's a lot of reasons I picked it. This is another one. One of the things that I think determines a good, strong sense of historical leadership or just like historical greatness in general is understanding the individual roles people play in making an organization great. And what you'll realize historically when you like do some reading is certain people are really good at figuring out that, okay, the guy who doesn't talk a lot, but does contribute in this way, that contribution is essential to my success. And having leaders who are capable of those things is huge. Great leaders are really good at identifying who does and who does not do the kind of unsung work that goes into the running of a successful nation state. And I think that's like, again, that's one of the good things about it. There's a couple of the English monarchs that don't do a great job of this. Elizabeth's a good example of somebody who does. Because Elizabeth easily could have let her ego, again, going back to yours, could have easily let her ego just go back and be like, nah, screw that guy, I hate him. She's like, nope, I need him back. Bring him back from exile. I'm gonna be pissed for 2 months and I'm gonna bring him back. It's all right.
I think there's a lot of leaders in history who do that. Who literally send away the advisor.
The key is, if you're a king, frequently you have favorites, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's your mistake. Don't have favorites.
Yeah, don't have favorites.
You know, I mean, just to pull another name out of a hat, the reason that Henry I was such a great king was he had no favorites. He executed anybody who screwed with him impartially.
Yep.
You know, it was like, no, I think you understand why this has to happen. And all the rest of you, you know, barons out there watching, you understand it too. There aren't going to be any favorites. I'm going to rule. And anybody who steps out of line gets the chop. Okay. I'm cruel but fair.
Well, and he was good at delegating.
Yes. Yeah.
That's another thing. Not Henry I, but who served? Oh, Henry III. Henry III is another great example of a king who, at times exhibited that skill really well, and at times did not exhibit that skill really well. And you can tell what's going on in his reign by how well he's able to identify the people who should be working with him and the people who should not. Right? Because this is the guy who famously was like, I think Eleanor of Aquitaine's a good idea to tick off. I think I should fight with all of my sons. That's a great call. Not a good call. That was heavily veiled sarcasm. Also, however, he does get William Marshall to fight alongside him. So, like, that's dope. Like, you know, and again, you could tell. Sometimes it goes well, sometimes it doesn't. And yeah. Anyway, delegation, identifying when people are important, and acknowledging that plot armor exists. And those are all of the real life medieval reasons that Genesis is important.
Okay, I'm with you. Okay, in the meantime, to answer Dungeon Matron's question, I don't think he fits because I believe that was by design, by his own design, I mean, rather than being a circumstantial thing.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it doesn't. It's. I think he would say all the people that are important, for whom it is important to know who I am, know me.
Yeah. Although that's what happens when you run the world's biggest religious grift.
Yeah.
Although he chose a successor pretty well, so
he did. See, that's a guy who understood talent. He didn't get Genesis.
Yeah.
That's gonna be my new verb now. Did you guys get Genesis? Oh man. All right, Karl, what do you got for us, buddy? I'm excited.
Okay, so my first one is a 2-for-1. So I have okay, this one is a bit of a number 2 sandwich because it's Pepin the Short and Carloman. So it's okay. So they're the two sons of Charles Martel, and one of them is the father of Charlemagne. And they get completely overlooked because of that. I mean, in European history, I don't think you can get more giant than Charlemagne and Charles Martel.
Yeah. Just crushed.
Yep.
They just get absolutely trucked by their family members.
Okay. Yeah. On the other hand, I would say that again, it's a Philip of Macedon situation because there's no way that Charlemagne could have done what he had done without the setup that his father and his grandfather and his great grandfather had put into place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, but Tom, go on.
Yeah, I mean, it's also, I think one of the things that makes that a really, really good one is the Frankish idea of partible inheritance.
Yes.
You know, this isn't as simple as, oh, somewhere in the line, there's a maybe slightly weaker, you can look at it that way, but certainly slightly less known guy, well, that happens. But the tendency in the Frankish monarchy is for everybody to kill everybody else.
Right.
And usually it then falls into chaos. And the fact that what gets handed to Charlemagne ultimately, and frankly his brother, right?
Yeah.
Is still really a relatively coherent realm.
Okay, but if we rewind it a second, it's actually it's coherent because of what Pepin had done.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Excuse me. So I want to rewind back to a bit before Pepin became king. We've got in 737, so that's 7th century. What do you call it? 7th century? 8th century. I always mess that up. Anyway, 737. So Theodoric IV, king of the Franks, dies. And pretty much nobody notices because the mayor of the palace, Charles Martel, was running everything anyway. He'd been running things for decades at that point. Kept everything running, took care of the treasury, took care of the armies. He was one of the best commanders. I would say, I think one of the best commander in Western Europe at that point in time. So no one really wanted to mess with him. And he didn't even bother to set up a new king because, hey, we don't need him. We can just carry on as normal. The bureaucracy is running. All is good. So that's why until a few years later when Charles Martel dies himself. And he divides his titles between his sons, Carloman, the elder, and Pepin, the younger. Now, this might shock people who have watched our streams before or people who study history. They too did not try to murder each other. Okay, which was very surprising. So one of them took East Francia, the other one had West Francia. They took care of their stuff, but they did have to face quite a few rebellions because, again, there's no king. These two are in authority, and they're still pretty young. They don't have the military background that their father had to fall back on. So it was literally a case of who died and made you king. Right, and they start crushing a few rebellions. They also have to deal with their younger half-brother, who did not get a title. So they just go around crushing rebellions for a few years.
Which is normal.
Which is normal, yeah.
Yeah, it's a Tuesday.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So after a few years, after a couple of years of this, Carloman the Elder says, okay, we need to get something to shut these guys up. So they elect, so they crown another Merovingian king, Childeric III. Nothing changes, the guy's a figurehead, they're still running the show. But again, the provinces are still rebelling, so they just keep messing up people. And in some places it becomes kind of a campaign of terror. Carloman in particular is known for the Blood Court of Stuttgart, if I remember correctly. Somewhere around that area. How did I take a note of this? Anyway, he gathers up all the Alemanni chiefs for a peace talk, he says. And he just has them arrested and executed. As one does, it happens very often.
Sure. Yeah.
It's a Wednesday.
Again, standard practice.
Yeah. Don't go to peace talks, it seems like.
Yeah. And basically.
You ever notice that? Peace talks are very rarely about peace.
Yeah. Yeah. Strange how that happens. But anyway, that's the end of the Alemanni as an independent tribe, because from that moment on, they have no nobles, they have no authorities, they just have a Frankish ruler imposed on them.
Yeah.
Okay, time goes on, and Carloman decides to retire to a monastery. Now, both the boys had been educated in the monastery of Saint Denis near Paris. From what I can understand, they took very different lessons from there. Carloman was like, oh yes, this is, spiritual peace is good, it's nice, yes. Seems to be the more religious of the two. Pepin was more like, oh yes, this is useful to me. I can get people to comply with this. But anyway, Carloman decided to retire, which I suspect might have been a form of either PTSD or he was just tired of all this. Because it didn't seem to be something like it. Sometimes you get rulers forcing siblings into monasteries and stuff. This does not seem to have been the case here. But anyway, Pepin ends up with the whole kingdom to run. And again, he's got this figurehead of a king who actually does nothing useful. So he decides to take over himself. He writes the Pope and says, hey, is it wise to have a king who has no power? And the Pope looks at Pepin's letter, looks out the window and sees the scary-looking Lombards camped outside his territories. Looks at the letter again. Now it's a good idea to have a king who has powers, and gives him his blessing. So they ship Childeric to a monastery, and Pepin crowns himself. Okay, from here starts going through. He attacks the Lombards, secures several cities, which he gives to the Pope, and runs a number of legal and ecclesiastical reforms. So the legal reforms are basically the foundation for what would later become feudalism. Mm-hmm. Now, the ecclesiastical reforms are something that his father and grandfather had already started running. And again, at this point, the Kingdom of Francia is made up of several loose tribes. You've got the Franks, you've got the Bavarians, the Alemannians, etc., Saxons. And the only thing they can figure that they can use to unify everyone is, okay, we're going to make you all Christian. Everyone's happy, everyone has a way to communicate. So he pushed that pretty hard. Now, fast forward on to 754. Pope Stephen II visits Pepin. And this new thing happens. The Pope anoints Pepin and his sons. So that's Charles and the younger Karl. Now, the anointment thing is pretty... I know you had mentioned it in your video about the paladins, Kyle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is a pretty new thing because it was not part of Frankish culture and it was not part of Roman culture.
Right.
But basically what happens is they literally took it from biblical sources. You know, with the prophets anointing the king of Israel, etc., etc. Because they needed something. Okay, we no longer have the previous kings, but now this king is approved by God. Here, seal of approval, ointment, good to go.
Yeah.
And he also gets, at this point, he also gets given the title of Patrician of Rome and Defender of Rome, which again sets up the process for his son to be able to become a Roman emperor later.
Okay.
Okay, then next up, he also finishes his father's business driving the Umayyads out of the south of France. So Charles Martel had been able to contain the Arab invasion that was coming out through Spain. His son finished pushing it out. So again, you've got a pretty consolidated country at this point. The rebellions have mostly calmed down. He's proven himself in battle. He's gotten the official recognition from the Pope. So we've got that legitimacy going on there. And he also starts opening diplomatic missions to the Abbasids, which are all the way over there in the Iraq area. Sorry. So again, it's a projection of power way beyond his territory, and it also gives him an ally very near to the Byzantines, which are his main threat at the moment, because if they decide to take over Italy again, he'll have them on his doorstep. So it's nice to have someone on their back door. Okay, so towards the end of his reign, he's got another war of terror to consolidate some breakaway provinces. And basically he dies after 17 years of reign. And as you say, the rest is history.
So it sounds like Charlemagne just did exactly the same thing that Pepin did, only with better PR.
Again, in Kyle's video about paladins, he says one thing, Charlemagne did it longer and better, which I think is the best way of explaining the Middle Ages.
Well, again, hey, here we are back at Philip and Alexander, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I mean, but what's interesting is that again, this is I never can remember who was it. Lord Palmerston, I don't know, somebody, but one of the British foreign secretaries said, Britain doesn't have any perpetual allies, but it does have perpetual interests. So, if you functionally, in terms of what they're looking at, Charlemagne isn't looking at anything differently than Pepin, right? I mean, the strategic situation is still the same. And interestingly, obviously, like with the Pope, for example, the fact that Pepin made the donation of Pepin basically to the papacy and got rewarded because the Pope was afraid the Lombards were going to take over, and that is absolutely repeated in Charlemagne's reign. Only now he says, not only am I anointing you, I'm anointing you, Roman emperor.
Yeah.
Because it worked fine the first time. We're just replicating what we did with your dad, basically. So it really does end up sort of looking like, as you said, I mean, Charlemagne does almost exactly the same things, only bigger and better, or at least better known. I mean, not to downplay Charlemagne. He is my great, 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 whatever grandfather, and everybody else in the world, basically.
Yeah. Hey, now some of us are related to Genghis.
Yeah, well, you can be related to both. It's okay.
Yeah, that's true.
That's true.
But yeah, I mean, it is interesting that you can simply, I don't want to say simply, but you can take Pepin's campaign or Pepin's biography and just expand it, and now you've got Charlemagne's.
It's interesting because it goes both ways. Because again, it's what Pepin was doing was mainly reinforcing what his father and grandfather was doing. So
right,
it's almost like this multi-generational plot going on, or plan rather.
That's what I was about to say, though, is like, it's so interesting for people who don't study history, because I don't think they take into account the ideas of like, well, maybe now more so, because now people are like actually understanding what generational wealth means, but like generational achievement is a real thing, right? Generational foundation building is really a thing. And I love that you picked Pippin. That's why I did my like quiet applause for you in the beginning, Karl, because I hadn't even considered that, but he does all of the stuff that you've outlined. What Pippin has done is give his kid the keys to a functioning nation state before the concept of a nation state was really going to happen post-Rome. Like, that's so huge. And how did he get stuck with Pippin the Short out of all the nicknames? Not Pippin the Unifier, not Pippin the political innovator. That I don't know.
I can tell you.
Please.
It's because of bad translators.
Yeah, it usually is.
Yeah, look, the
bad translators?
Bad translators, yeah. Because he's only called Pippin the Short in English. In Italian, it's Pepino il Breve. In French, it's Pepin le Bref. It's not a connotation of short, it's a connotation of brief. Now, whether it's brief because he only reigned for 17 years, as opposed to the 40 plus years that his son did, or because I don't know, maybe
but you just said it. He's still in the shadow of his son, just because he only because he did a hell of a lot in 17 years, but he wasn't there for 40 years, so he's number 2.
Oh my God! You know what he is? Pip, do you guys watch the NBA at all? Or this is probably
I'm afraid not, but go on.
Pippin the Short is the Nikola Jokic of history. So
always hanging around, always there, always important.
But Karl, right now there's a guy in the Denver Nuggets. He's a Serbian basketball player. His name is Nikola Jokic. Statistically, he is probably the best basketball player that has ever existed.
Okay.
The dude averages over the course of like his 10 years in the NBA is averaging like 32, 35 points a night.
Okay.
For context, right? Your average NBA game ends at around 100, 110 points. So this guy is averaging a third of a professional basketball team's points by himself every game for a decade. He's still playing and is still considered right now the best player in the NBA. And everyone's like, yeah, but, and there's always all of these asterisks that follow it. It's like, no, statistically, he is the best player in the NBA right now. And it's always like, yeah, but LeBron's there. Okay, yeah, but Luka Doncic is here. Yeah, but like, oh my God, dude, Pippen the Short is literally just the Nikola Jokic of medieval history. That's crazy.
Well, I mean, but being called the Short is, he's not Charles the Great. He's not Charles the Hammer. He's Pippen the Short. Well, the other person who got nailed with that particular.
I mean, look, and then also there's
Ethelred the Unready.
Yeah,
he deserved that though. He was not.
Well, he was, but that's part of the joke. The Anglo-Saxons, their jokes are so convoluted sometimes. It's nuts. It's like an escape room, not a joke.
It's like an escape room.
Yeah, because so his name means well-advised, right? That's what Ethelred means. But if you call him Ethelred Unred, which means well-advised, badly advised, ha ha ha, right? But now the poor guy is just always Ethelred the Unready. It doesn't actually mean unready. It means well-advised, poorly advised.
Well, that was the other thing too I read about that joke, is like his name being Athelfred the Unready, but his name being the well-advised is part of the joke. Like, you better be well-advised because you sucked at your job.
Well, and it's also because Anglo-Saxon riddles are like three-dimensional. It's also the fact that he swung back and forth. He's a total, he doesn't stick with one policy. He doesn't see it through. So he'll try to fight the Danes one day and buy them off the next. So he never lands on a consistent policy. So anyway, I love it. It's literally a three-dimensional nickname.
On that topic too, by the way, of just sorry, I feel like, Karl, did I cut you off? I'm sorry. If I cut you off, please let me know.
No, go ahead.
I will shut up. Okay, because another thing, however, like that reminds me of Athelfred versus Pippin. Athelred's mom does basically all of the stuff that Pippin does for Charlemagne. And Athelred's like, yeah, I'm not going to keep any of these reforms. And in fact, I'm going to destroy evidence of the legacy. Like, we didn't start learning about the early Saxon queens until very recently, like in terms of like how big those discoveries had been. And we're like, Athelfred, dude, you screwed the pooch, bro. Okay. She gave you everything.
And he just literally just said he's head out of history kind of thing.
Yeah. But we don't. It's cool. Don't worry about it. I was like, I can't, dude. I can't.
I was gonna say,
if we ever do, go back to that series of our favorite people in history,
we definitely will.
When we get to the Middle Ages, and I don't know how we're going to split it up, but roughly in that period, I have 2 Anglo-Saxon women on it.
Okay.
Yes,
that's good.
That's why I love you, Tom.
I was going to say that Frankish humor seems to have been a lot more straightforward because there is one of the later emperors called Charles the Bald.
Mm-hmm. He was bald.
So called because he was incredibly hairy.
Wait, what?
So called because he was incredibly hairy.
Yeah. But and that's actually the way the English do it a lot. If you're bald, you get called curly, and stuff like that. It's very strange.
That's actually that. You know what? This just makes me happier because it just proves like human beings have not changed at all.
No.
Like
humans gonna human.
Like,
yeah.
The humans are gonna like literally. One of my best friends growing up was a kid named Tom who probably said maybe 2 words a week. And we did like hiking, we did outdoor adventures. I spent, I kid you not, a week and a half with this kid living in the Adirondacks in high school. Like, we lived out of a lean-to, we hiked mountains. It was great. Tom probably spoke 1 sentence, but probably every 2 hours, somebody, while we were hiking or climbing or prepping dinner or something, would just go, Tom, would you shut the hell up? Like, but that's, and he would just look at us and just go,
yeah.
Like, but that's humans. If someone looked at that record of our trip, they'd be like, yeah, this guy talked all the time.
No, we should actually do one on people with terrible nicknames.
Oh yeah, I would like that. I would like that.
We should definitely do that. We should
some of those. I mean, nobody's going to beat Frederick II, right? Nobody's going to beat Stupor Mundi. But
I don't know. I mean, hairy breeches.
Well, okay, yeah. That is a good one. But Wilfredo the Hairy, Raoul the Leprous, people like that. They got John Softsword.
All I can think about is the Viking called Child Lover, because they're literally like the Viking equivalent of good with kids, because he would take kids and throw them up in the air and catch them point first on the sword. Which is that's such dark humor.
Yeah,
I'm not even Karl, we don't know who this guy was. They just know, literally it's an account of a Viking mercenary in Italy in the 900s, in 1100, something like that. But literally his name translated from Norse to good with kids, and it was because he would take kids and just chuck them and then just catch them.
I'm sure he would have kept the point.
Yeah. Yep. So there's some humans have dark humor too. Dude, people in the Middle Ages would have loved It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Yes. Well, Karl, I think Pepin is so great just because he got squeezed from both ends.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's probably number 3, in fact.
Yeah, but he didn't even get the name because again, everyone in his family seems to be called Pepin Charles.
Yeah. Don't get named Pepin there, really.
Okay, so what's your next pick?
My next pick is again something people may have heard of him. I don't know, but his name is Robert Hooke, and he is one of those people who perhaps isn't as well known as he should be because somebody tried to make it that way.
Okay.
And when the number 1 is the one trying to make it that way, and the number 1 is Sir Isaac Newton, you're going to be number 2.
Yeah.
You're not going to win that one. So, so who's Robert Hooke? So Robert Hooke was sort of in that sort of early Enlightenment period from the mid 17th to the late 17th century. And he was a polymath. He not only was what we would think of as an actual experimental scientist as opposed to a theoretical scientist, he was also an architect. He was a chemist. He was I'm not really sure you could call him an artificer, I suppose.
Okay.
Because when you're out on the cusp, like folks were in those days, you ended up building your own apparatus. But he was a surveyor. But everything that he did was completely overshadowed by Newton. And Newton made sure that Hooke was overshadowed. So what did he do? I guess we all know Newton because of gravity and calculus, and you may even know that he was the master of the mint for 30 years, I think. So, again, another polymath. What you probably don't know is that he was the biggest asshole in the world.
I had heard something to that effect, yeah.
And
I'm smiling because I know this whole story, and I'm so happy someone else is throwing a Newton slander because I hate that guy.
Yeah, I cannot stand Newton. And he's always sort of held up as like the first great modern scientist, when the fact is that he wrote more on theology than he ever did in science. But again, this is largely PR that he did. He didn't publish a lot of his theological stuff. He published his mathematical and physics stuff, right? So people aren't aware of it. But so Robert Hooke, rather than running down Newton, who we could run him down endlessly. What did Robert Hooke do? So basically what happened was that in the 1650s and 1660s, when the Royal Society was about to be founded and then was founded, is that Hooke was the guy who made it work. Hooke was the secretary of the Royal Society. Hooke was the guy who arranged all of the demonstrations. He arranged for the write-ups of experiments to be printed. It was his bad luck that Newton was the president of the Royal Society. And when anybody wanted to talk to, Newton would just elbow him aside every time there was something, oh, somebody needs to talk to the Royal Society, talk to me, basically. And this relationship between Newton and Hooke is not a strange one, because there's new stuff being discovered and experimented on all the time. And it was super, super, super common for these proto-scientists to argue with each other all the time, to slander each other all the time, to claim primacy in discovering things all the time. So it was a very, very intellectually charged environment. And I mean, if you think about Newton trying to make sure that Gottfried Leibniz never got any credit for simultaneously creating calculus. It wasn't that Leibniz was claiming that like Newton had stolen it or anything, but Newton claimed that Leibniz had stolen it. And in fact, clearly they both developed it at roughly the same time. But that wasn't good enough for Newton. And if he was going to be that way about some obscure German in some obscure German court, you can imagine what it was going to be like with the guy who technically, in a way, worked for him. He wasn't going to let that guy steal any of his thunder. And so he, over the course of 30 years, stepped on Hooke in as many ways as he could. But this is what Robert Hooke did. He invented new scientific instruments, including tools to build them, like a tooth-cutting machine. He was the first to discover that fire was a chemical reaction rather than an elemental force. You may have seen, I mean, the one thing that I think people may have seen from Hooke is this line drawing of a flea in incredible detail. That is from his 1665 Micrographia, which is the first exploration of microscopic life using a microscope. He actually coined the word cell.
No shit.
I
said no shit. Whoa. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
He described how fossils are created and accepted that some animals only known through fossils might be extinct.
Okay.
He proposed that the Earth's surface was formed by volcanoes and earthquakes. He was the surveyor to the city of London. And he was Christopher Wren's assistant in the rebuilding of the city. So, Wren was a busy guy. He turned to Hooke because Hooke was a surveyor. And in fact, Wren subcontracted most of the building work to Hooke.
Whoa, okay.
And as a result, it was Hooke who surveyed the entire city of London after the Great Fire. So he was both a theoretical guy and an extremely practical guy.
Yeah, that sounds like a hell of a resume.
Yeah, and at the same time, it was kind of weird. He was so busy that in a way he really, I mean, I'm not sure he could have fought Newton anyway, but he didn't have the time to fight Newton. He was too busy. There's it's just called the monument in London, but it's a monument to the Great Fire, right? And everybody thinks of it, oh, that's right, it's near Pudding Lane where it started. But because Hooke was the guy who was the architect who created it, yeah, it works as a monument. It's also an astronomical observatory that you can go to the top of and take sightings of stars.
As one does. Okay.
So he's just a guy who did everything and never got credit for it. Never got credit for it. And it's sort of in the end run, I mean, it gets a little wild. There were people claiming that Newton had actually set out to destroy every painting of Hooke or drawing because there weren't any. At least none had survived. Well, we don't think that's true anymore, but there is literally an artist now who has devoted herself to painting Robert Hooke until there are more paintings of Hooke than there are of Newton.
And nature is healing, baby.
That's right. The pendulum swings.
And nature is healing, baby.
So there's, you can, a lot of what Newton did itself built on what other people had done. Yeah. In fact, there's a fair amount of evidence that Hooke actually gave Newton the idea for gravity. He didn't really work it out like Newton did, but the idea that two different bodies attract each other and that there's an inverse proportion between the distance and the mass, that's a Hooke idea.
All right.
And Newton actually acknowledged it early on in their relationship, and then later on denied it. Yeah. So he's really a true number two, because if Newton had not been there, it would be Robert Hooke who was held up as the epitome of science in that period. The other thing, I guess, that's held against him is, especially by the Victorians, is he had a relationship with his niece for like 14 years. So, that you can't really hold him up as a wonderful person because of that.
Yeah, fair enough.
On the other hand, everybody hated Newton. It's just that he was really important, or at least he made it think he was.
Wait a second. The British loved Darwin. Darwin was banging his first cousin the entirety of his life.
But everybody did that.
But I just like, come on, British people, figure this out. Oh man!
But that also tells you, by the Darwin thing, it tells you why his entire family, basically studied genetics.
Oh God.
Well, and Darwin figured out too about incest and how that was genetically bad. That's one of the most heartbreaking things actually to read, because like obviously like marrying your first cousin now sounds gross and awful, but like obviously it was pretty common at the time.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But like I read an excerpt of one of his, like, I forget if it was a diary entry or a letter, when he figures out that like his relationship is what caused the death of his children. That is one of the most heart-wrenching things I have ever read. This is a guy who literally is realizing the person he loves most in life, which, because from most accounts, his marriage was healthy. Like, it was a healthy, happy marriage. He valued her as a person, which is rare in Victorian times. Shouldn't have been, but it was. But like, that is a heart-wrenching letter to read. That was like, he was like, oh, everything I hold dear is also the seed of my own destruction. Like, that's horrendous to think about. Like, again, not at the topic of our video, but just like, that.
But it does. I mean, these things have repercussions. So, I mean, I never can remember the exact relationship. I'm going to say it was just a cousin, but maybe a second cousin. Francis Galton.
Yes.
Who was closely related to him, was also a pioneer in social statistics and in genetics. And I think he also married a relatively close relative. So, those kinds of concerns are important.
Yeah.
But anyway, so when Hooke died, there was, he didn't get a state funeral. Nobody did anything except went and cleared out his apartment, and they found, I think under his bed, they found a strong box with like 1,500 pounds in it in gold, that kind of thing. I mean, he wasn't a miser or anything. He funded his own experiments and stuff like that. But the result is he just kind of got lost, and Newton, who outlived him by several decades, made sure he stayed lost.
Yep.
So he's probably, to my mind, of the ones we've done so far, probably the purest number two, in that the brain was exactly on the same level as the guy who was number one, and he couldn't transcend Newton's position.
Yep.
So
also watching this, by the way, I love watching this with Karl, like watching Karl's face during that entire time. Because obviously, like, again, you and I, we should get matching t-shirts. So just like Newton haters. But I know, like, the guy's a prick. The guy is honestly like Thomas Edison,
Yes.
but worse. Like, like everything Edison does to Tesla and to like the early innovators of America, Newton was doing to the early pioneers and foundational fathers of physics.
Hey, just like we said, humans gonna human.
Humans gonna human. Yeah, humans gonna human. It's exactly it. Humans gonna human, right? But just watching Karl's face slowly twist into like shock and horror every subsequent sentence, that was an experience.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's part of it, is that in this particular case, it's not just that Hooke was a great mind who accomplished a great deal.
Yeah, I mean, he sounds absolutely hyper competent.
Yeah, but it's also that Newton was a real son of a bitch.
Yep. You know, that gave me kind of an idea for a game setting, at least. It's like, again, if you take an artificer and you have a group of artificers and you have to push your inventions through an increasingly complex and bizarre bureaucracy.
Yes.
A friend of mine used to work for a company called Game Brewer, and they made a game called Fossil Wars, which I don't know if anyone is familiar with that story, but in the early days of American paleontology, it was not uncommon for people to fake dinosaur bones or to break into other rival museums and labs and destroy dinosaur bones to discredit. Yes, it is like the Wild West was literally the Wild West for dinosaur fossils. Like all of the stuff you associate with like gunfights at the OK Corral and like sabotage and poisoning and like all of this like skullduggery and clandestine battles.
Literal skullduggery.
Literally skullduggery. That happens in the American paleontological community.
Okay, it's like, okay, let's do science.
In like the mid to late 1800s.
Yeah, one little thing. At one point, a rival group actually breaks into the dig that another group is doing and dynamites the cliff that they're working on.
Shit.
Okay. Yes. And leaves and thinks they've accomplished something. What they don't realize is that they've exposed an even greater trove of fossils. And the first group come back and is like, oh my God, it's all gone. And then they're like, oh, wait a minute. Look what we found.
Dude, Karl, if you ever want a good read, man, I'm telling you, the paleontological community in Britain and America from like probably 1820 to like 1915 is sounds like it. Humans gonna human. That's the theme of our show, everybody. Thanks for coming out. This is Humans Gonna Human, the podcast.
Right? It's kind of the theme of all of them, actually.
It's very true.
Yeah.
All right, I guess it's my turn then.
Okay, wait. Are you going to go with the? Are you going to go with the one?
I am.
Okay. Do you want Tom to expose the name first, or?
I'm going to tell it right now, and then I'm going to see what Tom wrote. What diadochi he thought I was going to mention. We are going to talk, ladies and gentlemen, about Antipater.
No, I didn't.
Who did you put?
I went with Ptolemy.
Oh, Ptolemy was too obvious. Ptolemy was actually my first pick. No joke, when I was thinking about this. Ptolemy was my first pick, and I was like, yeah, but people know the Ptolemaic dynasty, and they know Cleopatra. I was like, I'm not going to pick Ptolemy. Ptolemy's the obvious of the diadochi. So, oh my God, that's too fun.
I appreciate Antipater.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So, for those of you who don't know, the diadochi is the name given to Alexander the Great's generals. And for the majority of Alexander the Great's life, it's Alexander the Great, he does okay. He manages to kind of keep everybody on a pretty short leash, so to speak. Not so short, however, that when he dies, and so they're like, oh, you know, who do I give my empire to? Alexander just goes to the strongest, which is such a bad thing to say. And now this is largely apocryphal. We don't know if this happens, and Alexander's life is full of those little apocryphal details, those little twists where we sort of hype up the myth of the man of Alexander. But one thing was clear: his succession plan was I forget. Are we allowed to swear, Karl?
Did he have a succession plan to begin with? Yes, you can.
Right, it's
swear.
ass. The plan's shit,
Ass,
right?
yeah.
Like, yeah, the plan is awful. The plan is like, I don't know,
There is no
vibes.
plan.
Yeah, his plan is literally just like, haha, the vibes, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, JK, haha.
I don't care. I'm not here anymore.
Yep.
Yeah.
And knowing Alexander, he's like, I'm too busy doing hot girl shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I love. By the way, I love a lot of like not a lot of, but like some of the depictions of Alexander. Some of his enemies keep depicting him as feminized, which is, again, humans gonna human. Sexism is a rampant thing in human history. It still is. But just the idea that Alexander probably would have been like, yeah, I'll paint my nails and kill you in a miniskirt. I don't care. He probably would have. Which honestly is peak energy. All right. Meanwhile, so Alexander gets vibe checked by disease while doing hot girl shit. There you go. I've crammed a bunch of Gen Z slang into this first sentence, and dies. And post death, he leaves his empire split amongst the Diadochi, which is literally his like Justice League of generals. And I say Justice League, even though they're probably more like the Legion of Doom. These are in some cases, the weirdest, strangest, most bizarre set of personalities and skill sets that you have ever seen in your life. We have one dude who is obsessed with siege towers, which is great. He literally spends the majority of his like gross GDP just building more and more ornate siege towers, because that's something you do when you're a motherfucking supervillain, I guess. One dude who literally is like so enamored with the idea of dying in battle that he's like, I absolutely just want to do that, and then proceeds to do that. We also have a guy who, for all intents and purposes, looks and acts like Alexander's clone. And he's not the successor. But yeah, anyway, he dies very early as well. So this is the strange group. Oh, and then we have Ptolemy, who is by far and away the most competent of all of them. Mostly because he's also young enough to play the game successfully. He doesn't have to worry about naming a successor for a very long time. Now let's talk about Antipater, who is my favorite of them for a number of different reasons. So we talked at length last podcast about the very highly functioning bureaucratic state that Philip of Macedon, Alexander's dad, leaves Alexander. Now, Alexander, as we have, astutely pointed out, is busy doing hot girl shit all across the Mediterranean and Europe and wherever, right? And so that machine does not necessarily run itself. It is run by Antipater, who was considerably older than Alexander and was probably older than Philip of Macedon during Philip's reign. He knew Alexander's dad. He was loyal not just to Alexander, but to Alexander's bloodline. And he was, by all accounts, the only real adult in the room of that group of people.
Right.
I think Ptolemy probably would have been a good case for adult in the room if Ptolemy was not scheming to take his own power. Antipater's goal was not to carve out an empire for himself. Antipater's goal was to maintain what Alexander had built, conquered, and created. And to that end, he was highly successful. Everything that we have praised individuals in Rome about, like when we're talking about who were we talking about last time? Why am I blanking on the name?
Agrippa, Marcus
Agrippa.
Yeah.
Everything that we talk about with Marcus Agrippa, or like the famous not legislators, but the famous facilitators of the Roman Republic, is doubly true for Antipater, who literally, as soon as Alexander dies, Antipater puts down like 6 or 7 civic revolts, literally unalives a bunch of enemies that were threats to the stability of Macedon, shores up Macedon's borders, protects Alexander's child and wife, and basically either purges or brings in new blood to every branch of Macedon's politics to ensure that the machinery that Philip and he built, the machinery that he maintained and ran for most of Alexander's campaign, continues to run. This is how good Antipater is. When Alexander dies, Macedon is stable. The world is literally falling apart around them, and Macedon is stable, despite having lost its legitimate king, and despite the fact that his successor in Macedon is 12.
Okay.
Antipater is great at what he does. He is absolutely fantastic. He is, again, by all accounts, he is one of the few second places that ultimately, and that's the thing, I don't even think he's a second place. I don't even think he wanted to be on the podium at all.
Yeah.
Which I think is what makes Antipater one of those rare figures in history that we don't talk about, because this is a guy who legitimately is the most civic servant of all civic servants. Like he literally did not seem like he wanted any power. He did, like, insofar as he didn't want it for himself, he consolidated power in an attempt to create stability. He purged enemies in an attempt to make sure that the average person didn't suffer as a result of Alexander's death and the political collapse of everything Alexander built. But like, he, by most accounts, had one goal and one goal only, which was the stability and longevity of the empire. And that didn't just mean for the rich. It meant for like everybody. Now, I'm not saying he was some great reformer who cared about the common folk, but he was not somebody who was like, I'm not doing, he's like, he didn't want to like expand the gap of disparity between like the haves and the have-nots. He literally was like, we are going to do this business as usual.
Yeah.
Everyone's
Stability is the greatest gift.
Yes. And that is such a huge rarity in history, but particularly in antiquity, for somebody who is that level of skill. He was, again, a consummate legislator, a fantastic administrator, a great bureaucrat. Now, all of those things are awesome. Like, all of those things Agrippa had. He was also tactically brilliant. The dude was not somebody who was incapable in a fight, either personally or professionally. Again, he was a professional soldier for much of his time, and by the end of his career was a professional general. Antipater balled. Like, I just like it. Just I'm floored that we don't. But again, he's not glorious. He's not glamorous.
He doesn't do any of the fancy stuff. Yeah.
The reason he is glossed over is his biggest problem is that he doesn't name his son as successor, to show you how little Antipater wants power. His own son is capable, is talented, unfortunately is unscrupulous as balls, and is a problem, like, in terms of like his personality and his designs. This is not a guy who is going to he does keep stability, but in a very different, in a much more dictatorial way. And he sees that in his son and doesn't name his son as his successor, to show how little Antipater wants power for his own dynasty and his own dynastic run. But that winds up being his downfall. His son winds up eliminating every political rival after Antipater dies, kills Alexander the Great's son, kills Alexander the Great's wife, completely purges Alexander's dynasty. It's gone. And basically then spends the rest of his time making sure that nobody remembers Daddy Dearest.
Okay.
So,
so it's another case of is it another case of erasure then?
Yes, absolutely it is, which is unfortunate because Antipater is one of the rare civic servants who just wanted to show up, clock in, and do his job. Yeah. And as Tom pointed out very astutely, stability is one of the greatest gifts that you can give, and it happens so rarely. And it's all Antipater wanted was stability.
And I think one thing that sets him apart from the others, including Ptolemy, is that he's not an empire builder, right?
Right.
He's not about building an empire. In fact, he was essentially left behind to run Macedonia by Alexander. Well, Alexander was off on his great adventure in the East. Okay. So when the news comes back that Alexander is dead and it's now a free-for-all, and because he knows all these people, he knows Ptolemy, he knows Seleucus, he knows all of these other folks, right? And his realism leads him to the position of it would be suicide and just bad generally, right, to try to use my position as essentially regent of Macedonia to try to hold the entire empire together. And what he does is he marks out the boundaries of real power, things that he can control. And he's like, I'm fine if Ptolemy and Seleucus, kill each other or just fight each other for 1,000 years. I don't care. My job, as it was for Philip, as it was for Alexander, my job is to keep the Macedonian patrimony, not this empire, but the Macedonian patrimony together. And that is basically Macedonia, Greece, little bit of would now be northwestern Turkey. This is the Macedonian heartland. This is where Hellenism is at its strongest. This is where he's been in control now for the last at least decade. This is his real power base as well. But as Kyle said, he's clearly not doing it for himself. And that's really one of the amazing things, is that you see that the other Diadochi going out, they're doing it for themselves. If it's Antigonus One Eye, he's doing it for himself. If it's Ptolemy, even though he's probably in a sense the smartest of them all, he's doing it for himself.
Yeah, he's wildly ambitious, which is like part of the reason that he lasts.
But he's also cautious. That's the thing. Yeah,
I think the cool
he's got
part,
the time to be cautious, right?
Right, and that's the thing that we don't remember. Like, if Antipater was 10, 20 years younger, this is a very different story. Yeah. Antipater could probably find a way to deal with his son before he bites the bullet. And this is the other thing that I think you pointed out, Tom, so succinctly, is another reason that I love Antipater. This is one of the rare examples of a leader in antiquity who understands the limits of his ambitions. Mm-hmm. How many times can you say that about a leader in history?
It's not even antiquity.
The only other one that I can think of, by the way, would be Hadrian.
Yes. Hadrian's a great example. Hadrian is a great example. Yeah. And again, if this were a different story in a different time, there's a very real chance Antipater does manage to keep the entirety of Macedon, and maybe even expand a little bit back into Anatolia. Like, just he would have been able to keep it.
Yeah. And like, you have to, again, to sort of, the greatest, in order to understand somebody, you need to understand what their enemies and rivals thought of them. Mm-hmm. Ptolemy, I think, is clearly the smartest of them all, and he pulls off one of the most incredible coups of all time, which is he actually steals Alexander's body.
Yes, and brings it
to Egypt. It's like getting the Ark of the Covenant, basically.
Yeah.
Yep. But Ptolemy never goes after Antipater.
None of them do. Yeah. Or I mean, if they do, they regret it almost immediately.
Yeah. Yeah. They start going after his son after he's gone. But nobody wants to, and part of that is like, we know he's not coming after us. We know that he's stable where he is. So we don't have to worry about him that much. But they also know that he's a strong leader, and you don't go and attack him on his own ground because you'll probably lose. So I think he's a great number two, who in a weird way is number two because he is so good at what he does.
Yeah. And that's another thing too, is like thinking about how Ptolemy viewed him is really interesting for me, because Ptolemy is nothing if not ambitious, capable, savvy. And it's one of those things that feels like, oh, Ptolemy's like, nah, I respect him too much. I'm not going at like, because Antipater was the old man in the room. He was their teacher. He was their friend. He was their mentor. Like,
well, and they all know that there's a reason that Alexander said, "You take care of Macedon." The other the analogy that I would make, and boy, there's a stretch of years here. At the Congress of Berlin in 1878, when they sort of settled the foo-for-all after the end of the most recent Russo-Turkish War. Mm-hmm. So there's a Congress in Berlin, and all of the great powers send representatives there. And of course, by that time, Germany is unified. So Bismarck is playing the genial host. If anybody knows what's what, it's Bismarck. And the current British Prime Minister doesn't, as is usual, send his foreign secretary. He goes himself. And the current Prime Minister of Great Britain is Benjamin Disraeli. So Disraeli goes off to Berlin, and again, you remember we don't have perpetual allies, we have perpetual interests. Right. So both Bismarck, who was not involved in the Russo-Turkish War and couldn't give a crap about the Balkans anyway, and Disraeli, who was really only concerned about Constantinople, that's his only thing, they are both at this conference. Neither of them was involved in the war. They're not going to, but they have goals nonetheless, even if the goals are don't let anything happen, right? And at the end of it, Bismarck is talking to, I think it's State Secretary Holstein, and Holstein says, that seems to have gone pretty well. We were playing the role of honest broker. I think we came out okay. And Bismarck says, yeah, we did, but the British came out ahead. And Holstein says, what are you talking about, that old Jew? And Bismarck looks at him and goes, and I'm going to paraphrase this in modern movie language, okay? Because what he says is, der alte Jude, ist der Mann, which is the equivalent of somebody saying, you don't get it. He is the motherfucking man. Because
awesome. Yeah,
because it is. I mean, if you get the stamp of approval from Bismarck,
yeah,
Yep.
you are that man.
But that's why
Ptolemy basically saying, whoa, it's Antipater. I get it. We don't fuck with it.
That's the thing there's the reason I brought up the idea of them being kind of like a Justice League, because like, I don't know if anyone watched Justice League Unlimited, but like Antipater is kind of like a Wildcat from the old JSA, where he's like a 70-year-old superhero and a team full of like young guns. Mm-hmm. And every one of them is just like, listen, like, I get it. You're powerful. Don't ever try to put paws in the old man. He will beat the brakes off you. Yeah. Like, that's but because he taught most of that. Like that's the cool part. Is like,
you can't fool him. He knows every trick there is.
Yeah, he taught you your tricks. Like that's what I love about Antipater, is they're literally just like, I'll mess you up. He's like, leave me the hell alone. All I want to do is like hang out and just like live in Macedon and not worry about anything and just chill.
All right, Karl. Next one.
Okay, before that, why had you picked thought Ptolemy was the number 2 that Kyle picked? Because he's kind of big, isn't he? I mean, like, what would make him a number 2?
It's the whole Diadochi period is really tough, because after the initial Diadochi die,
okay,
it still goes on. It's like their kids now fight over things, and
right.
I think in a lot of ways, Ptolemy. Let me put it this way. In a lot of ways, and we've talked about this, that one of the reasons that Alexander is so fascinating is not necessarily because of what he does, but because of what his presence doesn't allow to be done.
Okay.
And when Alexander dies, suddenly the Diadochi are let loose. And now you see them as they really are. Extremely able people. They're the Justice League. Extremely able, but very different people. And I think Ptolemy could be a number 1, but I think because of sort of the dampener that is Alexander, I think all of the Diadochi, one way or another, are number 2 to Alexander. That's the level of his impact, either directly or indirectly.
Fair, yeah, that makes sense.
And ultimately, that's why I didn't pick Ptolemy. I think if you could make, Karl, an argument for like which one of the Diadochi is a number 1, it is Ptolemy. Ptolemy rules Egypt, which again at this point is the wealthiest part of the ancient world, successfully, with no challenges to his sovereignty or his supremacy for the entirety of his life, and lasts the dynasty that will exist
just stays
for
on
hundreds
for,
and hundreds of years. Like he does the thing Alexander doesn't.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
He achieved. He achieves, like, if you're gonna ask me, like, who's a better tactician? Alexander. Who's a better fighter? Alexander. Who's a better who's better at the logistics of military? It's gonna be Alexander. Who's a better leader? It's Ptolemy. It's not close.
Yeah. And part of it is, as you said, Kyle, he's younger, right? He takes his time. He isn't rushed. And so the result is he takes bite-sized chunks. He doesn't want to start World War II. He doesn't want to do that. He just wants you to let him remilitarize the Rhineland.
Yeah, okay. That's an interesting analogy. Okay.
All I can hear is thanks. All right. Who's your second one, Karl?
Okay. My second pick is General Thomas Alexandre Dumas. Okay. So he's definitely his son is definitely better known than him, but he's overshadowed mostly by Napoleon, who just went out on pretty much erasing him from existence.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought about some of Napoleon's marshals, and I just couldn't do it because Napoleon is so strong.
That's a fair point, but I mean, like this guy. I mean, I love this guy. This guy is practically an action hero, and not from his son's by his son's reports. It's literally all the correspondence and the stuff that is written about him. I mean, there are even Chuck Norris jokes about contemporary Chuck Norris jokes about this guy. Okay, and yep.
Oh, Karl, I almost picked Toussaint. I almost picked Toussaint Louverture, who led the Haitian revolts. Speaking of Napoleonic figures, I almost picked him too, because I think he gets overshadowed because of Napoleon, but he shouldn't.
The only Napoleonic figure that I really considered was Bernadotte.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one.
Again, at least he managed to found a family that's still on a throne somewhere.
Yeah,
yeah, that's not nothing.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Go ahead. Anyway, go ahead, Karl.
Okay, so as I was saying, this guy is pretty much an action hero. But so he started off in Saint-Domingue, modern day Haiti, and his father was a renegade French nobleman and human Chistin, and his mother was a slave. So at some point around when Alexander was 12, his father got word that, hey, all your relatives back in France are dead. You can come back and inherit your title. Only problem being that this guy did not have enough money for passage. So what does he do? He sells off his mistress, and his 3 children from here to slavery, with the condition that he can buy Alexander back when he gets his title. Okay, so the guy sails off. Alexander spends 2 years in slavery, and then his father sends for him, ships him back to France, where he is listed in a cargo manifest as the slave Alexander. But within a year, he's Count Thomas Alexandre David de la Payetière. So his father starts spending money in his education, gets all the sorts of, horse riding, philosophy training, classical training, sword fighting, the works, basically all the how to be a gentleman stuff. So at the time, Paris was not entirely hostile to people of mixed race, but it wasn't quite. It wasn't very equal either. There are several reports of people appreciating his company, and because he's often mentioned as being very witty, very good looking. Yeah, you know it is. Very, very witty, very good looking, and people enjoy hanging around with him. But he still gets picked on a couple of times. There's at least one police report where a naval officer started insulting him because of his color, and police intervene, and he's the one who's in trouble, not the guy who started the fight. But anyway, things are slowly boiling towards the French Revolution. But Alexander has more pressing issues at that moment because his father, now 70, has married his housekeeper, 30 years old, and basically he cuts off his allowance, which means that, hey, now he has to find a job. So he decides to join the army. Now, again, as a noble who should have been able to sign up as an officer, but because he's black, they're like, nope, you have to go in as a private, bottom layer. Which he does. His father isn't terribly happy about it because he says, it's not proper for a noble to sign up at such low levels. Please don't use your name. Which is when he starts to use the name Alexander Duma instead of the whole David la Paetier kind of thing. Okay. At this point, he starts racking up exploits. Like a few of them are almost definitely apocryphal, like I said, kind of Chuck Norris jokes. Like people saying that he could ride under a beam and pull himself up with the horse. But also there are a couple of documented examples where, for example, he captured, I believe it's 11 Austrians with 5 of his guys without a shot being fired. So it's not just, he wasn't just big and strong, he was also very able to psych out people if he wanted to. He meets his future wife when he's still a private, and her father tells him, "Okay, you can marry her, but look, you're just a private right now. Come back when you're a sergeant." Lucky for him, by this time the revolution is slowly starting to step up, and one of his former mentors says, "Hey, I'm putting together a regiment. Would you like to join?" "Yes, thank you." He goes in, he gets promoted to lieutenant, goes back and gets married. Because now he's about 4 ranks above sergeant. So the revolution gets going. We do have documented notes saying that he was really into the revolutionary ideal. At least the equality and fraternity part. Not so much into the murdering almost everyone part. In fact, his some of his troops had nicknamed him Mr. Humanity because he tried to avoid causing unnecessary carnage. Which is a nice thing, but in revolutionary France, it could very easily get you killed. Because, you're not... are you sure you're committed enough to the revolution kind of thing? But he gets results, he keeps getting promoted. At one point, he's promoted to a brigadier general and commander of the Army of the Alps. And the Committee for Security starts to push him. Okay, you have to take these passes now, make it happen. Which is a bit of a problem because it's winter and the French army at this point was not really very well supplied. In fact, they were trying to get him to take the Alps in winter with an army which did not have boots. Bit of a problem. Kyle, I think you mentioned it in your last video. It's like, what happens when bureaucracy breaks down?
Yeah.
You get armies in the snow without shoes.
Yep. When the systems break down and you've got, people who are not paid to have a ton of training and weapons. Shockingly, that does not go very well.
Okay, so eventually he does manage to win that section of the Alps against Austrians, which again, we're taking an untrained army led by a guy who was born in the Caribbean against against Europe's best mountain troops, basically. Mm-hmm. And he wins. Basically, he gets his troops to scale he scales the wall with them, but basically they scale up a cliff in the middle of the night, take over the Austrian gun positions and turn them on them. So again, we're talking untrained troops And basically they're scaling up a cliff wall on the Alps in the middle of the night. Surprisingly succeeded. Anyways. Unfortunately, at this point he gets called back to Paris to answer before court. At that point in time, that can only mean one thing. He was going to get an extreme haircut. So what he did was he just really procrastinated and took it really easily. And he basically waited long enough that Robespierre got his own appointment with the guillotine. So he could go back to Paris safely. So things changed around a bit. He got assigned a new army and sent out. Now, at this point, it's interesting that at this point in time, I believe he was the highest ranking man of color in a European or American army until Colin Powell came along in 1989. So yeah, that level of command was only repeated 200 years later. Okay, so what's happening around this time is
there's a Russian guy who's Ethiopian.
Okay.
I think.
Okay, I would have to look that up, but good to know. So what's happening at this point? Things are looking up for him. He keeps getting promoted. The directory is pushing through reforms that he was actually happy with, like, for example, the complete abolition of slavery throughout all the French colonies. Spoiler alert, most of the colonies ignored it, but it was a thought that counts. The army became completely segregated, the segregated schools were opened, things started kind of looking up. And people started to go to the guillotine less often, which was nice. Anyway, he runs into Napoleon. He ends up assigned under Napoleon's command. And basically the two start rubbing each other the wrong way almost immediately. For example, one of the points was that Napoleon liked to use looting to supplement his men's salaries. Dumas really didn't like that because, again, disrupting the locals is going to cause further trouble later on.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, he also notices that basically the guy was pretty much instrumental in a bunch of cavalry engagements and other actions, but he was being left out of the reports, just being sent back to Paris. So everyone else was getting the glory. He complained about it. He ended up getting demoted. Until the Battle of Cusa, where he ends up isolated, cut off against the oncoming Austrian forces. And he basically holds off an Austrian division until practically single-handed until the reinforcements come in. So he gets wounded in the head, keeps fighting. He gets wounded in the leg, keeps fighting. The reinforcements come in, the Austrians run away, and that's when they nickname him the Black Devil. Napoleon says, okay, fuck it, we cannot ignore this guy anymore, we're going to give him another command and we're going to promote him a bit. Things continue to develop, and Napoleon picks him as the commander of all the cavalry in the Grand Army of the Orient for his Egyptian campaign. Things could not go worse, to put it mildly. So first off, the campaign is very poorly planned, and they start losing troops just purely due to attrition. They're not prepared for the desert, they don't have the supplies. People start dying, and Dumas starts to complain about it. Because, hey, this is poorly organized, we're losing men. We should rethink this. Napoleon does not like that. Secondly, in the accounts of Napoleon's physician, when the Egyptians saw Dumas and Napoleon together, okay, Napoleon was not a midget, but he wasn't exactly the Hulk either. Yeah?
Yeah.
Then you have Dumas, who's 6'2", massive, standing on top of his stallion. Everyone thought he was the leader of the expedition. Napoleon really did not like that. But they stick together. They get to Cairo. They take over the place. And that's when Dumas realizes that they were not there to liberate Egypt. They were there to create another empire for Napoleon. Okay, Napoleon had no intention of breaking up the slave markets, as Dumas thought was the case. He says, okay, you know what? I'm just going to pick my stuff and I'll go home. Napoleon says, okay, fine. Easily replaceable. And he sends him off. Which is where things start to really go downhill for Dumas. He gets on a ship, sails back to France, but somewhere around Naples, the ship starts taking water and they have to make port. Unfortunately, Naples is no longer controlled by the French. It's been taken over by the Holy Faith Army, which is like the name of something that you would think you'd find in Berserk or something like that. But it's basically Sicilian and Napolitan peasants backed by Austrian troops and Vatican forces. They stick Dumas in a dungeon, incommunicado and he basically spends 2 years in there. So he's literally isolated from everything. He has no idea what's going on. He has no idea what's happening. Probably being poisoned because by the time he gets out of there, he's partially paralyzed and he's lost sight in one eye. And eventually, when the French take Naples, he gets taken out of prison. Gets back to France and he finds that everything has literally changed. No, not only is he broken from prison, everything he had worked towards in the revolution had just gone up in smoke. Napoleon is leading the show. He's rolled back every law regarding slavery and race that had been put in place by the revolution. So basically, slavery is in force in all the colonies again. Mixed marriages are no longer legal, which was a problem because he was married to a white French woman. And black people could not live within a particular distance from Paris, which was also a problem because that's where he lived. So again, this guy is broken, penniless. They're not giving him his back pay. He doesn't have his pension, despite asking for it for several times. And he actually has to write a letter to the government just to be allowed to live where he's staying.
Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, literally, just by the time he gets out of prison, his world has gone up in smoke.
And it was a Neapolitan prison, so yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, there's pretty clear evidence of him being poisoned during this period. They were trying to kill him. They just didn't manage to. They just messed him up. Okay. Napoleon refuses him any further military commission, which would have been impossible anyway, because again, the army at this point has become segregated. And he's not getting any back pay, so basically they're broke as hell. In fact, this goes on as he dies a couple of years later from stomach cancer, and his family is destitute. So his wife had to go take a job as a tobacconist to make ends meet. Now, the one good thing that happened to him after he was released from prison, and something that was very happy about, was the birth of his son, Alexander Dumas, which would later become the writer Alexander Dumas.
Yeah.
And basically, the kid growing up basically went on a one-man crusade to get recognition back for his father. Apart from rolling back the race laws, Napoleon has basically tried to erase all mention of colored troops in the revolution, which he had done pretty successfully. Dumas Jr., the writer, went on all out to get some recognition for his father at least, but he didn't even manage to get a statue within his lifetime. They did make one in 1993. It was taken down when the Germans occupied Paris. But he did get all his story, his father's life story from his father's letters, stories his mother had told him, packaged them up, and wrote The Count of Monte Cristo, which was actually the second draft of that, because in the first one he had Man of Color as the protagonist. That did not sell well, did not go anywhere, so he just repackaged it, and okay, that will go out when the world is ready for it.
It's marketing again.
It's marketing again, yeah.
It's all marketing. It's all,
Yeah.
It's that meme of like the dude with the pistol behind the other guy's head.
Yeah, why would anyone do this?
Wait, it's all marketing. Always had been.
So yeah, I mean, the guy's story reads like an action novel. Although it might be because The Count of Monte Cristo is very foundational, so it might be that action novels read like this guy's life.
Yeah.
But also,
but one thing that's very different with this is that we've largely been comparing people who do the same thing. And this is not, Thomas and Alexandra do not do the same thing anymore.
It's not Thomas and Alexander, it's Napoleon and Thomas.
I suppose, but I guess you kind of have this problem of because you think of Napoleon as this sort of Titanic Alexander type character, right? That just bestrides an entire time period. And he kind of ends up forcing out anybody who's like this because he's too big. So no matter how cinematic somebody's life is,
they're always going to take a back seat.
You're not going to know about it. Yeah.
Okay, but
it is a tragic story, Dungeon Matron. I was thinking, because the whole time we're listening to this, I'm like, man, like you, and maybe it's the father-son angle that always gets me, but like you can, as somebody who has been a fan of Dumas' work, like most of my life, it's so interesting because like I knew his dad was a military commander in the Napoleonic War, and I knew his dad was active. I didn't know it was like that. That's insane. Yep. That's amazing. And like reading that story, you can just, I don't know, the idea that this man would take it upon himself to not rehabilitate, but get revenge,
bring back to light,
ostensibly.
Yeah.
For like his father's legacy is such a cool, moving moment. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. That's that. Yeah. Like,
hey, Karl, you just wrote an addendum to Alexandra's whole effort. There are other people who existed besides Napoleon. Really? No, really, there are.
Yeah.
Okay, but to go back to what you said, like Napoleon and Alexander are not doing the same things. No, absolutely not. But they're both military men who took the opportunity of the French Revolution. Because neither of them could have risen to those heights without the revolution. But they were using it to entirely different ends. Napoleon wanted to build his own empire. Alexander wanted literally to just have equality, fraternity, and liberty literally for everyone. He was very much into that part of the revolutionary agenda.
You need to tell me the man actually wanted to do what the revolution was supposed to be about.
Yeah, which is very weird. Well, isn't it?
Yeah.
But the other thing, actually, I found while I was researching this, I also found that the political take on slavery in France at this time was mainly pushing towards abolition of slavery, with the sugar plantations being the main sticking point, because France was making a lot of money through sugar plantations. But also, among the research, I found also that they were still very proud of the American Revolution, of the success of the American Revolution, but slightly disappointed with it. There is a letter from Lafayette to Washington. To paraphrase, it says something like, "Hey, great job, but if I had known that you would keep slavery, maybe I would have thought twice about helping you." So yeah, the push for that equality thing was definitely coming true. What
I mean, that was true in the British Empire as well. Obviously, it was the sugar. I mean, the sugar plantation lobby was incredibly powerful.
I mean, it was enough to finance Napoleon's takeover in the end.
Yeah, well, but it's the other thing is, and as you said, Napoleon actually reinstated slavery.
Yeah,
and what that means is that when he falls, the Bourbons that come back are not strong enough, even if they wanted to get the forces together to get rid of slavery.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
it just goes back to humans gonna human.
Yeah.
You mean to tell me that a powerful lobbying group is preventing real, popular, systemic change at a grassroots level? No.
When did that ever happen?
No. That's never occurred. Ever.
Yeah.
I'm in this picture and I don't like it.
Yeah. Can I do my last one?
Please, go ahead.
All right. So the last one is somebody where it's like, look, if you want to be remembered, don't die.
Okay.
Okay. So my third one is Pierre Curie.
Oh. Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
And basically what this comes down to a couple of different things. But again, just to sort of very, very, very quick background. So Pierre was French. He was an experimental scientist. We're talking about 1900. And he fell in love with and married a Polish scientist who was sort of a grad student, I suppose, in Paris. Her name was Maria Sklodowska. And he said, I love you. And also, I'm really sure that you won't interfere with my research. To which her response was, I love you, and I'm sure you won't interfere with my research. So anyway, the point is, so Pierre and Marie worked together. They did have a couple of other collaborators, and they were pioneers in the study of radioactivity. And essentially what that meant, that had bad results eventually, but they were a team. They were absolutely a team. This was, again, sort of a new field, and they made some absolutely incredible discoveries in the field. And the result was that in 1903, the two of them and their sort of chief guy, whose name was Henri Becquerel, received the Nobel Prize in chemistry. And everything was great, and they kept going, and everything was wonderful. And then one day it was rainy in Paris, and Pierre stepped outside and got hit by a delivery wagon, which ran over his head and killed him.
I didn't realize that's how he died.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, literally, the wheel of this heavy wagon just.
It's one of the most Victorian ways to die ever.
Yeah. It's like, look both ways, guys. That's what that means. Now there's no I mean, if he doesn't get hit by this wagon, obviously he and Marie continue to collaborate. She lives on for decades after this, and in fact, she gets a second Nobel Prize in 1910. Mm-hmm. And part of, I mean, when they say this is what you got it for, part of the research that she is awarded it for is research she did with Pierre before he died. So he's not there for that one. And so she becomes the first person, I think, to win 2 Nobel Prizes.
Okay.
But Pierre only gets the 1, right? So he's clearly a slacker. So she goes on to work on this for another 30 years. Okay. So you would think, I don't want to end it there because that makes it just like, oh, scientists doing stuff in the lab. No. So they also do things other places, which is how they end up with 2 daughters. Okay. And one of them, who is their daughter, Irene, marries a researcher named Frédéric Joliot-Curie, and they win a Nobel Prize.
Yep. They're the most decorated Nobel Prize family in history.
So they get it for chemistry in 1935. So this is the only family that has 2 married couples with prizes.
Okay.
Yep.
And their daughter Eve, so Irene's sister, who is clearly the black sheep of the family because she doesn't become a physicist, first of all, writes her parents a biography, which again is going to be more about Marie than Pierre, because Marie's still alive and Pierre's been dead for 30 years. But she also marries Henry Richardson Labouisse, who wins a Nobel Peace Prize. So the Curie family actually has 5 Nobel Prizes.
Right.
Right.
It's 2. Yeah. Do we count? Do they award them individually? Because like, did it like
Yes.
Marie gets 2?
Well, technically, yes, you do get individually.
Yeah. Yeah. I was gonna say because Marie has 2. I was gonna say because I know this piece of trivia because I thought the number was 7. It was a grand total of 7 Nobel Prizes in the Curie family.
No, it's 5.
Okay, it's 5, but it's because it's gotcha.
I mean, wow. Oh, it's only 5, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I just love that Eve made up for it by going, I really hate science, but I think I'm going to marry some dude who can get a Nobel Prize.
In a different thing, just to spite them.
Yeah. See, I got one too.
It's in the humanities, it doesn't count.
So anyway, yes. Now, on the other hand, you have this downside that Marie, Irene, and Frederick all died from the effects of radiation poisoning.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it doesn't come without a certain amount of blowback, I suppose. So the reason that Pierre is number 2 is, partially just that Marie outlives him by so long and continues to be a major contributor in the field and continues to be recognized at the highest level, and is then every time one of her daughters is involved in a Nobel Prize, oh look, there's Marie who's there happily. It's sort of like if somebody in the NFL has a Super Bowl ring and then their son wins the Super Bowl as well. They always show up at the award ceremony wearing their Super Bowl rings, and then there's pictures of the 2 different folks where it's the same kind of thing, because it constantly reminds you that, oh, look, Marie has 2.
Yeah, they're the Mannings.
Great. Oh, wait, there's all of these Curies. Who's the only Curie who's not there? It's Pierre.
Yeah, no, right? They're the Mannings. They're the Mannings of science.
Yes, basically.
Yeah, they are. Peyton
Although there is no Arch Manning in.
That's true. Yeah, there is no Arch Manning in the picture.
Yeah.
Arch kind of is pulling Pierre and Marie duty at the same time.
That's right. So the thing is that if you were to ask Marie about this, she would not have been happy that Pierre was number 2. They were always a couple. They did everything as a couple. Yeah. And she would have been, are you kidding? I mean, I don't think she was self-effacing enough to go, no, I'm not really good. But I think she would have said, Pierre's just as good as I am, and he should have been there in 1910. And it's a tragedy, that he isn't. They were devoted to each other, and neither, I think, could have been successful without the other, really. So I really think that what it comes down to is that Pierre is a number 2 just because the driver wasn't looking.
Yep.
And if he hadn't hit Pierre and Marie both would have been number 1s. But Pierre died, so he's number 2.
Victim of literally a victim of circumstance.
Yeah.
Okay. By the way, Tom, the end is saying that you really do look like Adam Savage.
He loves your work on Mythbusters. I didn't want to say anything because I saw the comment, but I was like, I've never put that together, but you do kind of look like Adam Savage from Mythbusters. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, well, we need to wrap this up soon. I have to go do something out in the garage that involves an explosion.
Oh, no, see, there you go.
I'm just kidding.
There you go. Is it my turn then? Is that my segue?
Yeah, that's
Yeah, I
fine.
guess so. Yeah.
I mean, the Marie and Pierre thing is just like, sometimes you're just screwed by happenstance.
Yeah. I guess better happenstance than skin color. I guess I still am sad about
Yeah.
Dumas. I
Yeah,
can't.
both, yeah.
Yeah,
I will
Dumas is great.
I will probably be thinking about how sad that makes me, probably for the rest of today.
Okay, I wouldn't say that was. In the end, I don't think it was a skin color problem. I think that was Napoleon being a dick problem.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. Implicit racism is hard. Like, had those systems not been in place, I think maybe Dumas has greater success.
Right? I would guess so. Yeah.
Yeah, like I don't know. It's hard. It's hard to say, but it's like it's also hard to be like.
It is true that Napoleon would not allow anybody to,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's why he hated. That's why Murat. I mean, that's why he didn't like Bernadotte. Although it's not like Bernadotte wasn't a kind of a dick anyway. But like Murat, Okay, I know you're married to my sister, but I'm going to give you a kingdom, but it's going to be as far away from Paris as I can make it.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, systems of power are hard to like take out of account, I think, too. Just
yeah,
like
for sure.
Napoleon's arrogance is there, but like, you'd think somebody with as much clout, as much experience, as much talent as somebody like Dumas had the deck not been stacked against him, had that implicit racism not been in the system, it would have been a lot easier, I think.
You don't want to waste that.
Fight back.
Sakes,
yeah.
You really don't.
Which is always, I don't know, that is but it's fine, guys. You can totally take politics out of history. It's cool.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, right. every time I get that comment, it's like, listen, dude, I don't know how to help people sometimes. All right. Is it segue time?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
before we let Mr. Savage go out and tell us why you can't, in fact, launch a frozen turkey into space. Actually, you have to be able to launch a frozen turkey into space. I've been to the Pumpkin Chunkin Championships. You've got to be able to launch. Yeah, see, there you go. Well, no, then they'll never get to space.
Well, eventually, maybe.
Yeah.
Screw you,
but
it will get very. It will get well roasted, though.
Yeah. How many taxpayers?
But it will be defrosted.
True. How many taxpayer dollars the most expensive turkey?
Yeah, how much is that per leg?
Yeah, exactly. How much tax defrauding do we have to do? All right. So I have a general rule of thumb, historically speaking, which is if the Quakers are against you, you are probably cooked.
The Quakers? Seriously?
If you can. Oh, I'm sorry. Was that Karl?
Did someone piss the Quakers off enough that they?
Yes. If you manage to piss a Quaker off enough that they actually are willing to throw hands, you and whatever movement you're associated with are screwed.
Okay, I know how.
And so that's the thing. And so it was the 4th of July yesterday, and I'm not convinced America deserves a birthday this year, but you know what? Gosh darn it, I'm gonna throw some help the way of not even a number 2, I would argue, but maybe even a number 3. My pick is Nathaniel Greene, who is a continental general during the American Revolution and is entirely responsible for fighting some of America's best battles during that war, and for completely and totally getting the British out of the Southern Theater, which if you read about American history, and I love American history, shout out Mr. Breach, my boy, who's my high school American history teacher, and I hated American history prior to taking his class, and he made me so interested in American history that I passed the AP exam with flying colors because of that man. I did 6 hours of work a night for that class. He would give you a 128-page packet for every unit at the beginning of the week, and that was your job for the week. Every week for the entire school year. 128 pages. It was insane. But one of the things that comes up often, or doesn't come up often if you don't study the U.S. Revolution, is that the Southern theater of American Revolution is arguably the most important. A lot of attention gets put onto the Washington, D.C. area and New England, because those are areas that it's where it started, right? John Adams, we love John Adams, we love Thomas Jefferson, like, but as soon as you get south of Virginia, that's where the real fighting matters, because America is largely dependent on, throughout the entirety of its process, its ability to export raw goods to the rest of the world, in exchange for slaves, which again, not great, but economically speaking, the triangle trade is what keeps everything running. And all of that runs out of the American South. So if the British manage to take places like Charleston, for example, or Georgia, we are cooked as a country. The revolution will fail because economically the engine isn't able to keep running. It is just how it is. And while Washington is busy fighting people in the North, they appoint a guy named Nathaniel Greene as a general of the Continental Army in the South. Nathaniel Greene is a devout Quaker and decides that war is horrific and terrible, but the idea of oppression is worse. And he actually agrees to fight.
Okay.
So this is what happens then is the biggest one-sided beatdown that nobody saw coming. If you think the British presence in the North is a problem, the British presence in the South is an existential threat. They are so much more entrenched because think about who they've been dealing with for the years prior to the Revolutionary War. Who owns places like Florida? It's the Spaniards. Who owns a lot of the South? It's like Portugal and France, right? So these are colonial powers that England has already dealt with. They are familiar with the landscape, and they are even more familiar with the economic importance of that area. And so, shockingly enough, they throw a massive amount of time and resources at it. And Nathaniel Greene proceeds to go on what can only be described as a Viet Cong-style guerrilla campaign to wreak havoc on the British in the South. He is literally one bandana and the Fortunate Son soundtrack away from being that war. Literally, like, if you listen carefully enough in like Revolutionary War exhibits, you can hear bow now, bow now. Like, it's not even, it's true. He recruits the Scots-Irish, who at this point have, since the time that like the British colonies have been a thing, have been steadily migrating from the north down to the south because, shockingly enough, a lot of them are Irish and Scottish dissidents from England. They don't like authority. And so there's a lot of authority and established cultural tradition and practice in the north, particularly in New England.
Are those the ones that you mentioned in your Rangers video where they're
yes,
scouting
yep,
south? Okay,
yep, you are correct. The Scots-Irish, but they basically become frontiersmen of the American South because the nascent government there doesn't really exist. So there's not really a whole lot of people to tell them what the hell to do. And shockingly enough, when you live in a place that is humid, where your life expectancy is low, but there's very little authority and a lot of wilderness, you tend to be pretty good at murdering things. And Nathaniel Greene takes these guys basically and literally just engages in a guerrilla tactics campaign that culminates in the Battle of the Cowpens, which is one of the most fascinating battles to read about, listen to, watch videos on. I am not going to wax philosophical on that. If you're interested, it has been widely described as America's greatest tactical performance ever.
Okay.
And it's not wrong because, again, it is a numerically superior force. It is a tactically superior force. It is a force that has technological superiority. And Nathaniel Greene puts the beaters on them. It's not a close fight. It literally, everything that you could do correctly to string together a series of little victories that turn into a massive backbreaking victory is the Battle of the Cowpens. It is tactical brilliance. But Nathaniel Greene, there's a couple things that make Nathaniel Greene a preeminent number two, so to speak. He does not seek the kind of political career that Washington and his contemporaries seek. He despises war, which, again, this is what I'm saying. If the Quakers come after you, you're screwed because they fight war like it's the last war that they'll ever fight, because it probably is. So he was terrifying, and he never wanted to talk about it after the fact. He was like, nope, we're not bringing this up. We're not going to glorify it. We're not going to.
Moving on.
I'm moving on. I don't want any statues. I don't want any honors. If you throw a single parade, I will throw up. He's like, get away from me. But literally, so he does no self-aggrandizing about it. Specifically, he does the opposite, where he's the one downplaying his legacy. He's like, I don't want this. He basically he doesn't remove himself from the military entirely, I believe, and I'm not sure about this. I'll have to double check it. But I believe he goes into training and education for future American officers at that point. But he never fights. He's done at that point. Like he's like, peace, I'm out. No, zero part in this. And on top of that, I think if we're gonna go with like a big factor that makes him a perennial number two is the American Revolution. If there's one thing America is good at, it is self-mythologizing. And we like it just as a national character, we're really good at it, for better or for worse. But there are so many like larger than life characters that already exhibit signs of greatness and inhabit the sort of popular imagination, right? You have Ben Franklin, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Sam Adams, Patrick Henry, Paul Revere. All of these people wind up being massively important. And then on the other side of things, you even have people coming from other countries, like the Marquis de Lafayette, who is, that's our guy. Like that's like America's number one hero right there. Or even like the Prussians, like Colonel von Steuben, who became the guy who overhauls America's military during the Valley Forge time, right? Like all of those people are remembered as like the heroes of the American Revolution, and nobody talks about Nathaniel Greene. And largely it's because he eliminates his own legacy. Largely it's because he is best at the thing that he abhors more than anything else in this life. And largely it's because in a war of larger than life characters, the dude who is quietly, lethally competent generally tends to get forgotten. But Nathaniel Greene is like arguably is pound for pound, I think, a better tactician. He's definitely a better tactician than Washington, who is not very good as a tactician. Washington is a much better like middle of the road officer. He's a much better field commander than he is a total commander.
He's more of an Eisenhower.
He is 100%. The total war stuff he left to Lafayette, rightly so. Lafayette had a much better head on his shoulders for that. I don't think Lafayette's a better tactician than Nathaniel Greene is. I would put Greene above pretty much everybody in the Continental military. And again, it's crazy because if someone's like, if I mentioned Nathaniel Greene to your average American, they'd be like, who's Nathaniel Greene?
Yeah.
What's the Battle of the Cowpens? Like what is that? But like all of the stuff that culminates in the American victory starts in the American South, and it starts because of Nathaniel Greene.
Yeah, I had never heard of him or the Battle of the Cowpens before. I will be looking that up after this stream.
I will send you a link. I watched a whole video on it once, which kind of sparked my I was like, I knew of Nathaniel Greene, but I was like, I didn't know of Nathaniel Greene, and I was like, ooh, what is this? And the longer I watched, I was like, oh my god, what? Yeah, it's wild. So
I think a couple of things, and you kind of touched on one of them. One of them is that he did take himself out after the war, whereas most of our founding father figures continued to be in the public eye.
Yeah.
Right. Even if it was political now instead of military, they're all out there.
Yeah.
The other thing is that because people tend to look at results rather than process, to the extent that people ever think about this,
right,
the general idea is that the war as opposed to, or I should say hostility, the war as opposed to hostilities ended with the Battle of Yorktown in 1781. To the extent that they look up the Battle of Yorktown, what it's going to come down to is the British are encamped on this peninsula, and a combined Franco-American force pens them in there, and the British fleet can't get to them in time, whereas a French fleet does, and so they're forced to surrender. But the point is, which is not wrong in terms of what's actually happening in Yorktown, but the point is they're only in Yorktown because Greene has beat their ass so many times on the way going north that they are tired as hell. They are out of a lot of supplies, and they're looking for that British fleet to come and rescue them.
Yeah.
And that's not because, and I don't want to downplay, the importance of the Battle of Saratoga, for example, but that's largely a PR victory. but it's green that basically gives them death by 1,000 cuts, and the other reason that I think a lot of non-Americans and even some Americans don't get it is that, again, the scale of combat in the United States, both in the Civil War and in the American Revolutionary War, is unthinkable to people from Europe.
Is it?
So when the British take Charleston and that same army ends up in Yorktown, they have marched 1,500 miles.
I get you. Okay. So the size of the battle is the distances between. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
And 1,500 miles in a situation where a lot of it is basically wilderness. There's no railroad. There's no road for most of that space. You're just marking on cattle tracks and things like that. And by the time that Greene has intercepted supply wagons, picked off a few of Colonel Tarleton's favorite men. By the way, this is a situation where Greene essentially says, if you catch any of Colonel Tarleton's men, do with them what you will, because that was what Tarleton's men did. So, I mean, he's not a very Quakery Quaker,
Yeah.
He is, though. He's just a guy who's pushed to his limit. That's the scariest part about Greene. Is like his whole life reading his stuff like prior to this battle is reading like the world's nicest cinnamon roll. For him to be like, do whatever you want to Tarleton's men, I don't care. This, like, the Patriot is like Mel Gibson's character, the Patriot, is like a lesser version of Greene. Like, you want to talk about wrath? That is a Quaker. That is a Quaker telling you to execute war prisoners. What? Yeah. Like, you had to screw up royally to get Greene to get that mad. Oh my God, bro.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the main things is that all of the major cities, with the exception of Charleston, are in the north, right? So we naturally look at those. The British are taking, they're taking Boston. Okay, they leave ultimately, but they take New York, they take Philadelphia. And we tend to still today look at a map and go, oh, those are big cities. Those must be important. But in fact, as Kyle said quite rightly, the American economy runs on credit. And that credit is extended by largely British merchants to largely plantation owners in the South. That's where the credit runs. And the British are not stupid. They understand how a plantation economy works. And that's why, okay, we thought we could choke them off by taking these ports in the north. That's not apparently going to work. So we're going to take the south because it has this, this sort of Achilles heel.
I do want to point out one thing, by the way. Sorry, I realized I made a mistake. So Nathaniel Greene is the guy who orchestrates the overall strategy for the Battle of the Cowpens. Right. He is not the battlefield commander on the day of the battle. Okay. That's Nathaniel Morgan. So, or Daniel.
And Morgan is a Virginian who is, by the way, best known basically. He's basically the first commander of the Special Forces unit.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. No. Yeah, he is. Like, when we're talking about the guerrilla warfare, Karl, Daniel Morgan is like the field commander. But that I want to make that clear. I realize I did not make that clear, but I want to make sure accuracy.
Yeah. Okay.
By the way, I guess maybe Robert Rogers is really the first.
Okay, Tom.
Guy. But anyway,
Tom.
But go ahead, Karl.
No, sorry, I was going to say, for the sake of my fellow Europeans, 1,500 miles is about 1,700,000 individuals.
There you go. Well, having driven that, like I did a drive straight from New Orleans to Williamsburg in Virginia, and it's nothing but pine. I mean, I'm driving an interstate, right? I'm on this massive highway. It's still nothing really, except around Atlanta, except pine forest. That's all it is. And if you're doing that in the summer, wearing a woolen uniform, you are debilitated, And
Yeah, I can
that's
imagine.
what they were doing. That's what the British Army was forced to do. And at the same time, it was very difficult to send out foraging parties because they would get picked off. It was just a bad scene. So when Greene is orchestrating stuff, he is using everything, including the climate, including, insects, the whole bit. He's doing it he can, so that frankly, by the time that the British surrender at Yorktown, a lot of them are like, oh, thank God, now we can finally rest and get out of here. This is nuts.
That's what I'm saying. It feels very much like the Viet Cong style of warfare.
Yeah.
Like it is, it's just, yeah, it's a lot. Yeah. It's a lot. If you're British and you're in the southern state of the American War, you are in such bad shape because the British had more loyalists up north, up in New England. Mm-hmm. The climate was better.
I was just going to say the other thing is that Greene is a situation where he volunteers to be number 2. It's not important to him to be number 1.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, but yeah, that's my pick. It's my last one. I love Nathaniel Greene. The Battle of the Cowpens is really fascinating. The American Southern Theater is very important. It does not get talked about a lot. Yeah. And he bleeds England like a stuck pig for about a year and a half, and it's really scary. It's really scary. It's really scary. Like some spooky times, man.
Well, and by the way, this is the only theater in the war where scalps are taken regularly.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Why?
Not by Indians.
I got the part. I figured that. Yeah. Yep. Why?
Yep. It's not about winning. It's about making a statement. I don't like, this is the thing about being an American. I've tried to tell people this. I'm like, guys, America, like, we're not, how do I put this? America, like, if you're doing fantasy races, Americans are orcs. We just are. We are, right? We are a savagely militaristic culture. A lot of our government is run by old white men in towers. And we're fiercely tribalistic. I watched 2 people get into a fist fight over professional sport. Look at how Philadelphia works post Super Bowl wins.
Philadelphia fans. Woo!
Oh, not just Philadelphia fans, New York Knicks fans. Just Americans in general. And we will trash each other to hell and back because, like, oh man, the amount of things that I have said about New Jersey in general. And I love people from New Jersey, but I hate New Jersey. And I'm sure people say the same thing about it. But like, if you say something bad about an American around other Americans, like, hey, USA, it's like, it makes no sense. We are just orcs. The cruelty is the point, Questboard. You're not wrong. The cruelty is the point. It's not about winning. It's about fear. And that's again, the Quaker is running this. You have messed up so egregiously.
You've gone wrong somewhere.
When the Quaker's like, we need more scalps. Like, that's so scary.
Yeah.
I'm going to point out something, that this area that Greene and the Brits are fighting in is the area. I mean, this is not something that goes away, right? This is a tradition, and it will keep going, of it being a nasty place to get involved with something. Okay, the first mass murderers in American history, the Hart brothers, come from this area. Okay, but that is one end of, because people are isolated, right? It's easier to prey on them. It's, but let's take it to the other end. So in 1776, there's a baby born. We don't know exactly where. It's somewhere close to the boundary, which is total wilderness, right, between South Carolina and North Carolina. Even today, this is trackless. And if you try to find this person's birthplace, you cannot find it. Both states say that he was born there, but in fact, if you're in, like North Carolina says, no, it's in North Carolina. But in order to get to where they say it is, you have to drive into South Carolina to get there. So it's very strange. But this baby boy is born there in 1776. And supposedly, so the story goes, one of Tarleton's patrols fetches up at his family's log cabin and I don't think they like rape his mother, but I think they beat her up, and they may kill his father. I'm not sure. And so he has a lifelong hatred of the British. Okay. Well, as time goes on, he makes a living. He moves farther west as the frontier moves west. And he ends up, like a lot of these guys, he ends up becoming a lawyer. And then because he's a lawyer, they ask him to be a frontier judge, basically. And at one point, he has two litigants in front of him, and their lawyers start arguing, and he tells them to shut up, and he bangs the gavel, and they don't shut up. So he leaps over the bench that he's sitting behind and smacks their heads together. And then on another occasion, he's married. He's married a woman who's slightly older than him. Somebody says, she was still married when you married her, and he shoots him. Now we're talking about the 19th century. We're into the 19th century at this point. And this man, when he eventually sits in the White House in the 1830s.
I know exactly who this is too.
when he's sitting in the White House, he's an older man now. One of the state that he may have been born in says, you know what? That law that you're trying to enforce, we don't like it, and we're not going to do it. And he says, that's really unfortunate for you, because I'm going to pull out the U.S. Army, and we are going to hang a man every 10 feet
Jesus
on
Christ.
the way to Charleston.
Is this Jackson? It sounds like Jackson.
It's
Okay.
absolutely Jackson. It's
okay. So they go, okay, you mean it, Jackson. So we won't do that. And then to sort of cap it all off, he's leaving the Capitol one day, and a guy tries to kill him. And the gun misfires, and he charges the guy, and he's an old man by now, basically. And he beats the guy almost to death with his cane.
Yep.
He doesn't need any of these wimpy Secret Service guys to do anything. He's going for, and he comes out of that same milieu that Nathaniel Greene was commanding the U.S. forces in. That's what that whole area is like. The only reason he doesn't kill the guy probably is that his cane breaks.
That and his aides at that point had found him and pulled him back and away from him.
But they might have just let him go.
I would like to point out, and before we get to Karl's, because I realize we're probably as is tradition, we've yapped most of our time. But Karl, I don't know if you know this or not. Have you seen what the last words of Andrew Jackson, or his regret, like his final regrets? So John C. Calhoun, who was his sitting vice president, threatened to secede from the Union prior to the Civil War actually happening. And Jackson's response in writing to him was, "If you secede from my Union, I will cede your head from your body." I'm not paraphrasing. That's not me paraphrasing. That is the exact communication that was written on the presidential stationery by Jackson. I'm not joking. I am not embellishing. Those are the real words. Jackson literally was like, "If you cede from my Union, my Union, not the Union, my Union, I will cede your head from your body." When they asked him what his last regrets were, he regrets that he didn't kill John C. Calhoun himself. That was his last regret. He's like, "I didn't kill my vice president." And he didn't mean it.
Everybody believed it. Yeah. This is not posturing. This is him saying, really, I regret it. I wanted to kill him. I would have killed him.
Jackson.
Now, the irony, by the way, try this. At some point, pull up a picture of Jackson and a picture of Calhoun and put them next to each other. They could be brothers, because they're both Scots-Irishmen from South Carolina. They look exactly the same.
Yeah, it's great. In any case, those are the type of people that Nathaniel Greene is commanding. That's that.
All right.
That's a great way.
That's very scary.
They are so like, and not that the American South isn't still a little terrifying in some ways. I don't like any place in the U.S. that still has sundown towns, but the American Southerners at the time of the early colonial period, probably leading up to the Civil War, are a different breed of scary.
Yeah,
I get you.
I mean, and that's one reason why they dominate the army.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Karl, take us home.
Okay, so I am out of picks today. So my last one was Duma. So I think unless Tom, you've got another one. I think we're good
This is
for
it.
today.
This is the last one. You're bringing it home, buddy.
Yeah. Okay. Then we're done. Yeah, I don't have another pick for today.
Oh, you don't have another pick?
Nope.
Tom, do you have an honorable mention? I have one honorable mention that I was going to bring up.
I know that Lisa mentioned Mary Anning as a.
Yes. Mary Anning was a woman a poor woman who lived on the south coast of England in Dorset, and it looks very much like the White Cliffs of Dover, but it's farther west, right? So big giant chalk cliffs, and they're constantly eroding. And essentially, Mary Anning made a living finding fossils.
Mm-hmm.
And she is number 2 to the entire male-dominated scientific community, because she's the first one who discovered a plesiosaur, for example. She's the one who was risking her life digging around in these unstable cliffs to find these things. And then she had a little shop where she sold them. And, gentlemen amateurs would visit her and buy these fossils and basically claim them for their own.
Oh, okay.
And she was, even though she, was absolutely instrumental in the growth of paleontology. Of course, she was not allowed to join the Royal Geographic Society or anything like that because they didn't allow women. And she died relatively young in poverty. Her life sucked. And
it
she's
was the worst.
Just an incredibly, incredibly important person.
Yep.
Yeah,
in the end, I see that comment, and your dad is not wrong.
Yeah.
And it is an unfortunate thing, but your dad is not incorrect.
Yeah, the scary thing is that look, the only thing I know about the American South is from horror movies, and it sounds a bit too much like a horror movie plot. It's like yeah.
Well, humans is humans, ain't they?
Humans is humans.
Humans is gonna human, unfortunately, which is just I also can't believe that we're. I mean, I can believe that we're in 2025 and it's still happening, but
why don't we have flying cars yet?
Yeah, good question. That's what should be focusing on.
I care so much about people's skin color and what they're doing with their genitals that we have to focus on everything but it has to be that. I'm like, ah.
By the way, on the way to my jury duty, I drove through downtown LA. It looks worse than New York did in the 1970s.
Yeah.
And that was the most wretched, hive of scum and villainy I've ever seen.
Seriously.
Yeah. It's just,
Questboard,
I would have stopped and taken a picture, but I didn't dare.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So it is also not helped by the fact that you're talking about a lot of really beautiful buildings in downtown LA, things that were built, Beaux Arts style, stuff from the 20s and 30s. It's absolutely beautiful from the first floor up. But first floor down, you're taking your life in your hands.
Anything within reach, basically.
Yeah. I mean, it's absolutely horrible.
And on that note, I guess if we're gonna do one more honorable mention,
Yeah,
I did mention Toussaint Louverture, who is and I'm butchering that French last name pronunciation. I know I am. My French is so bad. I learned Spanish for a reason in terms of Romance languages, and there's a reason. But just his ability to essentially beat the Napoleonic army in Haiti is huge.
Yeah.
So that was a cool one that does not get nearly enough attention, does not get brought up enough. Yeah, that would be my honorable mention.
Okay.
Well, Haiti has been swept under the table since 1791.
Okay. So, Kyle, to add to that, when you remember when I mentioned that Napoleon had reinstated slavery across all the colonies?
Yes.
Haiti was one of the places where that did not take.
Yep.
So it's not happening here. Not happening again here.
Because Toussaint was my boy.
Yeah.
Fun fact about that one, though. Danny Glover of Lethal Weapon fame has been trying to get to a movie made about Toussaint Louverture for the last 30 years. And
Oh, wow.
no one will take it. No one will take it.
Damn.
Yeah. I also like to play a calm, relaxing game of Call of
Cthulhu,
Cthulhu because somehow I trust that Nyar Lethatep probably is more egalitarian than many of my current political leaders.
He's an equal opportunity absorber.
Yeah, which it's that line about some of those who burn crosses are the same to hold office from Rage Against the Machine starts to feel more and more apt every day. And I'm like, Tom Morello, I wish you were wrong about things a little more. Just a little more would be nice.
Do we have any idea what we want to do for the next one? Are we going to go back to my favorite people?
Okay.
I like cool nicknames. That's a cool one. I thought that was a neat.
Cool nicknames is good.
Okay,
topic.
so for the next one, we're going to do Hospitaliers on boats. For the one after that, we'll go back to. I really like the nicknames one though. So for the next one, we're going to go for Hospitaliers on boats. For the one after that, we're going to do cool nicknames.
Okay.
Sounds
good.
And after that, we'll go back to favorite thingies. It will give us.
I mean, that's kind of a good one. It's kind of a good one to have in the back of the mind.
Oh yeah, and in
always do it. Yeah.
In the meantime, we can figure out how to split up the Middle Ages.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah. That is a problem.
Thank you everybody for watching. Thanks for coming and hanging out with us.
Thanks everyone for watching, and thanks guys for the discussion. It's been lovely talking to you as always.
Yeah, always. That's been. I mean, I look forward to this. I look forward to this. Like, oh man, after this week,
I'm not really sure why we actually have themes for these because they end up going all over the place. Anyway,
I think it's more of a way to get started, I guess, because you're not wrong.
If we didn't have a theme, I think we would never approach anything even resembling an episode. Like, right? Like in the. We are a cake batter being poured into a too small mold, but like, at least what's in the mold, you know what I mean? Like, it's gonna be a hot mess.
Yeah, I get. If you're right, I think if it would look like ChatGPT on steroids or something.
It literally would.
Except that it would be mostly correct.
Yeah.
Okay, that's different.
Yeah, it's. Mostly correct.
Mostly correct.
It's like that cat monster from Adventure Time. I have approximate knowledge of many things.
That's right.
All
right.
Okay, guys, thank you all, and thanks everyone for watching.
Thank you.
And I'll catch you around. Bye.